Good evening, members. Welcome to this committee meeting. Formalities, fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of the room. Go down the stairs and meet in the Warbury Memorial Park. Item 2, meeting is being webcasted as normal. Item 3, to receive apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Miss Bean and Councillor Mrs Burgess, and I think we are now complete. Good evening. Good problem. We were expecting it. Resignations and replacements. There are none. Declarations of conflict of interest or Councillor Keating.
I wish to declare an interest in the issues related to neighbour care. I'm one of their volunteer drivers. I do not have a pecuniary interest, but I'm declaring my other interest now. Thank you. I do intend to participate in any debate about it.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I thought you were coming in on item 4, but just to finish item 5, so it was declarations and conflict of interest or whipping decisions. Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Under the declaration of any interest, can I just ask the committee to note that I am the appointed, this local authority's appointed representative to the board of Fairfields Arts Centre.
Thank you. Councillor Tilby, did I see a wave?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, personal interest in, obviously, in this on regarding the Urban Recreation Centre.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeks.
I also have an interest in shop mobility.
Thank you, Councillor. Item 6, urgent items. There are none. 7, to confirm the minutes of previous meetings. We've got minutes of the 6th of November to confirm. If everybody's happy, I'll sign those. Thank you. And we have minutes of the 19th of November to sign again. If everybody's happy, I will sign those. Rebecca. Item 8, member public participation. Member and public, participation. I'm not aware of any. Item 9, that was close. Item 9, a standing invitation to relevant portfolio holders, and good evening, Councillor Chair Ordiner. Item 10, referrals from other committees or the Council. There are none. 11, issues referred by Cabinet, none. Brings us to item 12, which is paper B, discretionary grant funding, which Natalie Sweet will introduce for us. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thank you. In introducing this paper, I'd just like to go through the process that we've been through in deciding the recommendations to put forward for grant funding. There have been some changes which hopefully you'll pick up in a moment. Works continued during this financial year to review and realign discretionary funding given by Council, and the responsibility for funding of community schools, cultural, sports and voluntary and community and environmental funding now sits in one place underneath the commissioning unit rather than across a variety of business units, and this is a new way of working. This has ensured a better understanding of the wide variety of funding given by this council and has allowed for a more holistic view to be taken. The medium-term financial strategy set out that as part of addressing the council's financial deficit, a 15% reduction should be looked at in the overall grants budget. Works continued with the organisations to explain what is happening and to engage with them in helping us to understand the potential impacts of any decisions and what they might be. There's been regular communication with them throughout the process, including workshops, individual meetings and general correspondence to update them on the process. In considering funding levels, the present funding application process was followed using existing criteria to evaluate applications. In addition, consideration has also been given to information organisations were asked to provide us with through impact assessments, which asked for the potential impacts on the organisation of 15% and 20% reductions or complete withdrawal of funding. The recommendations in the paper before you collectively deliver a 12% reduction against the budget, with many organisations receiving proposed reductions below this level. Each application has been looked at on a case-by-case basis, and for the first time, 2-year funding is being proposed for the majority of the organisations, giving them more certainty in the future. We will continue to support and advise the organisations that we fund, both about funding opportunities and also about training, and we will, through regular monitoring, be working with them to ensure that they are meeting the outcomes that we've set out and that they are delivering those improved outcomes for the local community. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Councillor Washburn.
Thank you, Chair. On page 20 of 165, in the third paragraph, it seems to allude to the fact that Fairfields may in fact lose its grant funding in the 2013-2014. Am I correct in thinking that?
Thank you, Councillor. The situation with Fairfields is that they are working with Proteus Theatre Company in looking at a new model for operating Fairfields. The proposal at the moment is that should that not be successful, the Council is recommending that we no longer fund Fairfields.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. 2 questions, Natalie. First of all, we've talked about a 12% reduction in funding, the saving of around 300,000. When we were looking at the forward projections, we were talking about a 15% saving 400,000. Can you just tell me why we have only cut by 12 when we were looking at 15? And secondly, on paragraph 546, still 20 of 165, new request for funding. It says here, it was felt at this time it would not be appropriate to award funding given the financial pressures. I'd like to think with new applicants that they are treated on their merits, and where they cover similar areas better than existing granted bodies, that we may well prefer a new body to an existing one. And we wouldn't automatically just say, sorry, it's a new body, we haven't got the money, we're just not going to consider it.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Why not a 15% reduction? We did work very hard looking at each of these applications on a case-by-case basis, and we used the information that we were provided through, as I said, the funding criteria, the funding application and the impact assessment. And we did revisit those several times during discussions with fellow officers, with cabinet members as well. And it was felt that we'd achieved a 12% reduction in funding, and that actually to take any more, to just simply reach that 15 at this point in time would not be acceptable, because it would mean kind of taking a 1% off here, 1% off here, 1% off here, and we felt that that wasn't a sustainable way to look at funding. So it was decided to stop there. I think on your second question, it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to recommend funding to those organisations, but you are absolutely right. We have looked at them on each case-by-case basis again and merit, and they aren't organisations which perform a similar function to any of the existing organisations that we fund. However, we do want to explore opportunities with some of those organisations through the commissioning process moving forward about how they might collaborate with organisations that we currently fund, etc. But it was felt at this time that due to the funding pressures, to actually introduce new people into the funding budget would not be appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. For now, there are two items I wanted to raise. The first one is 4.3 on page 17 of 165. And the second one is 5.43, which is community schools on page 19 of 165. I know what each of the words reads and is intended to convey on 4.3, moving towards a commissioning approach. It is intended that services will be commissioned based on evidence-based understanding, which is 4.4, first point of it. Now, most of the work that this council does, in key terms, we provide services to the public in terms of waste collection, waste disposal. We work with Hampshire County Council on the waste disposal. We provide street cleaning, parks and open spaces. We buy a load of services for different things. And grant funding, I think, would probably come slightly down the list in terms of priorities. So could somebody please explain to me how commissioning is going to affect these things in words that I can relay to members of the public? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Grant funding and commissioning don't sit separately. They can sit alongside each other. We currently have a sizable budget allocated to grant funding, and what we will be doing over the course of the next few years is looking at options for how we might continue to grant fund on certain areas, but also where we might want to introduce collaboration or different ways of delivering services as opposed to just simply grant funding organisations. At the moment, we fund organisations based on how they meet council priorities. What the change that we are looking at is looking at what outcomes the council wants to achieve and how and who is best placed to meet those. So there potentially will still be grant funding, however it will be looking very different, and we will be having those conversations over the next year.
I'm assuming we're not going to take over all these organisations and run them for ourselves. Let's assume that for the purposes of discussion, right? If we're not going to take over all these organisations and run them for ourselves, looking at options for them, not by them, but for them, and looking at options that relate to collaboration will be for them instead of by them. Having conversations doesn't mean anything to me, right? I can have conversations or I can propose policy. As a councillor, I would probably want to propose policies. If we're not going to take over these organisations, why are we not allowing them to run their own organisation in the way that they have decided to set it up and organise and run it, whilst determining for ourselves, as we do now, if we can and should support them? So how is commissioning going to change that?
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Yeah. No, we absolutely are not intending that we would take over those organisations. What we are trying to do through the commissioning process is to work up a series of outcomes that improve residents' experience of living, working in the borough. And we are certainly not intending to tell organisations this is how you will run yourselves in order to meet those needs. The intention is very much, once we have those clear outcomes agreed, to go to organisations and say, there are some opportunities here for how you might look at working in the future. They have the choice to say the same and say and provide evidence that they are running, they are achieving those outcomes in the best possible way currently. But there's also an opportunity to have a conversation with them about how might you want to structure yourselves in the future. We are certainly not imposing that on any organisations. We're wanting to have that conversation with them. And certainly the conversations we've had so far are that they are willing to have those to look at how they might do things differently in the future.
On to my second item, Chair. In our general discussion, I'll come back to the points that have been addressed. On the question of community schools, there's a whole range of community schools which it is proposed should receive some support. There are 3 community schools, one of which I'm involved in. I'm a council-nominated member of their community committee, the Allwood Science College. I'm a council-nominated member of their community committee. They were told, and I was there, that there's no funding available for them this year and into the future. That's what they were told. Now, my words, not the report's words. So I was surprised to read in this report how other schools' community committees have got an entitlement to apply for and get monies. So perhaps you could help me to understand what's happened here. Thank you.
Councillor Keating, as you'll be aware, I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't know what was actually said at that meeting. But to my knowledge, there has never been any indication that any existing or indeed any new organisations could not apply. It was an open process, and we engaged with all of those organisations that are currently receiving funding, and were having conversations with them about their funding applications. And a number of those organisations made a decision not to apply for funding.
I'll come back to this, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Regan.
Just a question on the proposals for the Basingstoke CAB. I know in the paper actually acknowledges that their workload is increasing and will increase with the introduction of universal credit, welfare reform, etc. So I'm a bit mystified, really, why there's a 5% cut in our budget when their actual demand is increasing. I know we've got to prioritise the money, and surely the CAB must be our priority.
As I said, Councillor, we looked at each of the organisations on a case-by-case basis and looked at what they put in their funding applications and in their impact assessment. And it was felt that Basingstoke CAB, despite increasing workloads, were in a position where they could take a funding reduction. We will, of course, through monitoring throughout the year, keep an eye on that situation should that funding recommendation be approved by Cabinet. And if there's any change, then we will work with the organisation to address that. But as I said, in their impact assessment and in their funding application, they didn't indicate that that would be a particular issue for them.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I think before I ask my question of the officer, I do want to, in case I might forget it in the excitement of the debate, just congratulate the officer on the report. And when you actually read it through, the appendices and the detail and the contents, there's an awful lot of work gone into this report. That's softening up the officer now for my question. I have some specific requests to make. No, I'd like to refer, please, to page 37, first of all, of 165, which is the Anvil Arts. And just a question there is a comment on the second paragraph which confirms that along with funding they receive full rent subsidies for both buildings, but there's not I can't see any indication of what the actual value might be in regard to that. I don't know whether that is something, not choosing to look to put Natalie on the spot tonight, but it's something I would be interested to, if I've missed it in the context somewhere else, please direct me, but it's something that has a bearing, I think.
Forgive me, Councillor Parker, I'm not able to answer that question, but I can get back to you and let you know what that value of that subsidy is.
Thank you. Can I then just also, on the page 38 over the page, on just to ask, does the Anvil have any reserves? And again, maybe if that's not to hand, perhaps I could be advised, please.
No, it's not to hand, but yes, I can advise you of that.
We are got copies of your answer, please.
Yes, indeed.
You have to carry on.
I'll give way to anybody else, of course, if I am taking too big a share of time. What I would like just to ask on destination of Basingstoke, in view of the page 120 of 165, sorry, 120 of 165, in view of the spare office capacity that we have here in both buildings, can I ask what was the deciding drive for destination Basingstoke to move out of these offices and take, I would assume, their own at a rental cost?
Destination Basingstoke decided as a board to move out of our offices because they felt that it was time for them to be less aligned with the council and to start moving away to become more sustainable on their own. What they have done is they've moved to premises which are up at the Innovation Centre on Basing View, and they're actually operating out of there, and they felt that that was a more appropriate place for them to be in terms of who they engage with and where they were at that time within their business plan moving forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Just for the minute, then one more question, Chair, in regard to page 123 of 165, which is in regard to the community furniture project. I wanted, just out of interest, to ask, when we see how well they're assisting our recycling target, and then there's a comment that seems deemed to be fit to enter in the report, that all furniture and white goods collected by the borough are sent for incineration, whereas the earlier part of the report majors on how many the tonnage of white goods that have been recycled. I must only then assume that have been some discussion between our collection department and the project as to whether we couldn't deliver those to them.
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to the question, but it is a valid one, and I will follow it up and let you know, because it seems as though perhaps a conversation does need to take place if it hasn't already, and there's not a good reason for it. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair, and I think Councillor Keating has indicated a further question as well. Couple of questions really. One was as reference in a number of the detailed entries in the report to funding having been withdrawn at various points in time to various organisations by Hampshire County Council. It would be helpful to sort of have clarity in terms of what contact there is between the borough and the county, and to what extent, you know, the decision making between the borough and county is joined up in circumstances where both organisations are funding a particular organisation. Both to avoid duplication, but also to ensure that, we don't end up in a situation where we are, basically ending up subsidising something from which the county has withdrawn funding. So if the officers could sort of clarify the degree of contact that there is between the county and borough on these funding decisions. Also wanted clarification. Didn't see a detailed reference in the report, but there's reference to a 78% reduction in funding to Basingstoke and Bloom, and it would be helpful to sort of have further information about the background to that recommendation. I also wanted to understand any interrelationship between a funding decision about drum runners and parallel discussions to this committee about Basingstoke Live, where I understood that one of the difficulties was in there being voluntary sector capacity to help with the organisation of Basingstoke Live, and I wanted a reassurance that any decisions that were being made here, wouldn't put Basingstoke Live in further jeopardy. And also in relation to the anvil, obviously the anvil is...
Councillor Shaw, could I perhaps ask the officer to answer a couple of those? And
Yeah,
just
sure.
otherwise you get sort of...
By all
Just about
means.
to turn the page over and I thought,
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I'll take those first three. We do have contact with Hampshire County Council through officers and through portfolio holders as well on where we fund equally, and we've had some examples of that in when we've looked particularly at emerging issues, etc. in the past. So that contact is there. So they do include us in consultation if they're thinking of making significant reductions or withdrawing funding from certain areas. And we can have conversations with them about where we're at in terms of our thinking around funding those particular organisations. It doesn't always marry up, as you'll appreciate, that what our recommendations are also the same as theirs. There is an organisation currently that we're working very closely together on, looking at supporting Whitchurch Silk Mill. I think it mentions it in the papers. So we're working very closely together on looking at that organisation. So those conversations are there, but it doesn't always mean that the outcome is necessarily the same for each of the organisations. Basingstoke in Bloom, a decision was made a while ago that this council would not actually participate in running the Basingstoke and Bloom competition and all of that went with it, and it was passed over to a voluntary group that had set itself up to do that. The funding, the amount of funding that has been recommended is what they received this current financial year. There had been more budgeted previously, but they have only applied for the funding that you see recommended in the report. And the relationship of Drum Runners grant application with ongoing work with Basingstoke Live, we do take consideration, particularly through the cultural strategy, of what organisations are contributing, and indeed we do that with other areas of work. So those delivering in sport, we take account of other strategies that particularly relate to that. The funding application was felt that at this time it didn't have a direct impact on what they would deliver for Basingstoke Live, and as I mentioned before, a decision was made that we wouldn't enter into new funding agreements with the new applicants at this stage.
yeah, thanks, Councillor. Carry on.
My question really in relating to the anvil, obviously the anvil is getting on for 50% of the of this total funding budget, and it would be helpful to understand in what level of detail, given that proportion of the budget, in what level of detail officers have looked at the issue of the Anvil's funding, relative to other applications, because what is basically recommended in the report is that, the organisation that has the single largest share of the budget, has one of the lower amounts of percentage grant reduction. And of course that has significant sort of knock-on impacts on what is then left available for other organisations. Perhaps the officer could sort of describe in a degree of sort of detail, how the Anvil's application has been analysed, and also particularly the credibility or otherwise of their indication that the grant reduction that we've contemplated would basically have led them to not discontinue their community and education programme, and whether that indication from them was analysed and challenged.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Yes, you're right. Obviously, the proportion of funding to the Anvil is the most significant of that whole pot of money. So we do look at what they provide us in more detail than we do. And as I said, we take these on a case-by-case basis. So, where people are applying for £1,000, we obviously look at that, on a case-by-case basis and follow the criteria, but probably not in as much depth as we would with the Anvil. We have quarterly monitoring figures which we pull out as part of this review process. We have a set criteria which has been agreed through committee that we follow in terms of assessment, so we cannot deviate from that. We use that as an assessment. But we also have annual meetings with all of our organisations where we go through in detail where we might have concerns or where we might want to pick up particular issues. I think the situation in terms of funding for the Anvil is that you're right in pointing out that a percentage reduction from the Anvil obviously has a knock-on impact. However, a percentage reduction to the Anvil in monetary terms is much larger than the majority of the other organisations. So we have taken that into account. There are other funding, as you said, other funding partners, including Hampshire County Council and the Arts Council, that we have to consider when we're looking at funding. And we have to consider that if we reduce our funding by a certain amount without a proper process gone through with them over a period of time, then that may impact on their funding and the status of the Anvil, particularly in terms of Arts Council funding, which is very complicated and has to be finely balanced. We did challenge them on what they've said about the education programme. And as you'll appreciate, I know it's difficult for voluntary and community organisations across the board, but particularly in the arts, they are taking quite a lot of reductions in funding. And as an organisation, we have said that we will continue to invest in our cultural organisations. So what we've talked to them about is, can you look at income generation in other ways to offset how you might then reduce the education programme? And that their response has been that primarily what they need to concentrate on is generating income in order to continue delivering the programme at the Anvil. And as I'm sure aware, visitor numbers and those attending performances are reducing because of the current climate. So it's a discretionary area of their work, although we do ask them to put in an education programme that they felt would be, from a business point of view, where they would make reductions moving forward. However, what we are talking to them about, and we are talking to all cultural organisations about, and extending that further, is how they might collaborate better in the future, so that education programme isn't necessarily dependent just on one organisation, but there's an education programme that potentially could go across a number of organisations in the future to make it more sustainable moving forward. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Keating.
sorry. Thank you. Why does the paper is headed Newbury Community Resource Centre? Does that mean we're giving money to Newbury because it's in a different county? It's certainly not within the borough borders.
No, that's just their name, the name of the organisation. The money that we fund the organisation is to operate this service within Basingstoke and Dean Borough.
So does that mean that the Community Funders Project is a wholly owned subsidiary of Newbury, but we're only funding that bit? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, it's one organisation. We're funding the bit that happens in Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you, Councillor Washbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Page 102 of 165, the Camrose Centre. Can I just ask the officer, have we got any update from Sentinel and Sovereign over their contributions to the project?
We do, and forgive me, I won't be able to go into detail because I can't actually remember which one is doing what, but one of the organisations is continuing with their funding. The other organisation is, in lieu of funding, providing them potentially with premises, and they're having ongoing discussions about that at this time.
Thank you.
Councillor Keating, you back with a question?
I'm looking at page 125 of 165. Bearing in mind what you said about general cuts, you only referred up until now to either 15 or 12 or 10%. The Basingstoke Gymnastics Club has a 5% reduction. Okay, the Basingstoke, is that correct? Am I reading it correctly? Yes. And the victim support has got a 20% reduction. Now, and the furniture project, the cafe project, should I say, got a 43% reduction. Now, I certainly would be unhappy for victim support to have a huge cut in their support, whilst the gymnastic club only has a small cut in their support. The other ones that stand out of the figures provided is that Hampshire and Isle of Wight, a sports partnership, Festival of Sports, no cut, Local Sports Council, no cut. It doesn't. We're providing services to a range of people, obviously. We're providing support to services for a range of people, but it doesn't seem to me to be rational to say that people who are fit and active should not encounter any reduction in their support that we give them, and the people who are victims of crime, for example, should have a huge cut. And I don't think that balancing act, I do not believe that balancing act is rational, and could you perhaps tell me why you think it is?
Thank you, Councillor Keating. As I've mentioned before, we have looked at these organisations' funding applications and impact assessments on a case-by-case basis. We have looked across the board to see where there might be some, I suppose, very stark differences in funding reductions, but primarily it's been on a case-by-case basis. The circumstances surrounding Basingstoke Gymnastics Club and their financial plan and their business plan and their involvement with the council over a number of years has led to a recommendation of, at this time, a 5% reduction. However, in the victim support impact assessment, they felt that they could take that level of reduction and that would not have a significant impact on the service that they delivered. The organisation that you referred to that had a much larger percentage, and bearing in mind we asked specifically in the impact assessment for responses around 15, 20% or complete withdrawal of funding, but we did make it clear that it could be any percentage in between those, but those were to help give us a guide for what impacts there potentially would be on service delivery. That was on a 3-year funding sliding scale of reduced funding as part of the funding package it received a number of years ago. So they were expecting that to happen. They were perfectly at liberty to put in a higher bid, but we felt based on what their impact assessment said that was a fair recommendation to put forward. Those that you've mentioned that are asterisked about County Sports Partnership, Festival of Sport and Local Sports Council that have don't have any funding reduction is because they sit outside of the grant scheme, but we have considered an impact assessment from them as part of this process, and they are in 3-year funding agreements and contractual arrangements which are all drawing to a close, so they will be reviewed separately as part of ongoing work moving forward.
When you refer to the gymnastic club, you said it was considered. I think I'm asking for a bit more supporting evidence to suggest. I mean, it's no good you telling me it was considered, but against what criteria? Was that criteria applied to everyone else? Are we saying to them, can you afford a reduction? And if they're saying we can, we just give them a big reduction. And if they say, oh no, we can't afford a big reduction, you know, we just pluck a figure out of thin air.
I'm not in a position currently to go through all of the funding criteria that we've been through. Suffice to say that all of the funding criteria that we have assessed these organisations against have been approved previously by committee. So we're working along those, against those criteria that have been set, and there are too numerous for me to go through currently. I'm happy to send you copies of the criteria that we've used, but what we have done is we've taken what they've put in their funding application, which includes business plan, it includes, as I've said, the performance monitoring information that we collect during the year, and it also took account of their funding, their impact assessment as well. So we've used all of that as evidence to base our decision on, and we've done that for each organisation against the funding criteria as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just with regard to just asking for a little bit beefing out on page 113 of 165 in regard to the cafe project. What appears to be a startling comment in the first paragraph under overview of organisation, namely supermarkets favour European migrants, which lead to those with learning disabilities becoming isolated. My question to the officer would be, am I right in reading in that in the sense that that's for employing staff? Is that employing staff in the supermarkets, cafeterias? Is that what we're actually saying?
We would have taken that from the information that they provided to us, so it's something that has been put forward by the organisation itself. And yes, our assumption has been that that's what they're referring to, that in terms of cost associated with employment, that there's a trend that they have seen, the organisation has seen, with employment going to others as opposed to those who had previously had that employment. So yes, I think what you're saying is what we've assumed. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm not aware of any more questions, so we can now move into... Oh, Councillor Tilbury's come back.
I thought I probably got lost along there. On page 76 of 165, the Open Recreation Centre, it's more an I passed this report by the chairman of the ORC for comments on there generally, and the thing he came out on there, it says equivalent to circa 700 individuals with regard to the membership levels, up the second paragraph there. So that's actually said should be about 1,700 on there. I think that's probably just a straight typo on there. The other comment he made is relative to other sports facilities. It talks about the number of users, but it's based on the number of users who are members of the ORC. Whereas with other sports facilities, it talks about the total number of users. Because obviously, if Overton United are playing whoever, then they got the other team as well. Whereas because of one of the issues around the membership is because they're members, it doesn't include the people who are non-members but who use the facilities. Obviously the opposing teams, netball teams, such like. So it was just an observation he made when comparing it to some of the other sports facilities there. You know, the actual number of users is far higher than. It's not just the people who are actually the members, you know, the main ones who generally pay for it. The other one, obviously on the anvil, which starts on page 37. I mean, going back to the time when we first sort of had the major upheaval when we sort of merged the Anvil and the Haymarket together, one of the issues was this was going to try and make it more efficient and all this sort of thing, and Roger knows this very well, but we seem to not much seems to have changed, and in fact in some respects when they're talking about increasing income, I mean one of the things that generated income at the Haymarket was they had quite a good little restaurant there which generated income. That was closed to do something else. That closed. So the restaurant isn't there. It's moved. I think he moved to the sports centre, Mr. Rose, isn't he? So that's still obviously quite viable. So there are things like that that could be done to improve the viability of that thing there. But the other obvious one is we're paying £6.59 per visit. That's being paid only really by people who live in this borough. But if you look at the location of Basingstoke relative to West Berks and all the other ones, and if you look on their charity. Well, they call it not mission state, but it gives a sort of area of the areas that use it, and it, you know, quite Bracknell Forest, West Berks, as you can imagine, people particularly from that direction, because Basingstoke is quite on the edge of the borough there, and obviously there is an issue there that, you know, we pay for everything and they all get it for free basically, or they, you know, we pay all the subsidy and stuff, and whether there's something we could do, and it was raised before, that people from the borough would actually get a bit of a discount, which might actually help them, because we're effectively paying for it twice, aren't we? Whereas everyone else who comes from just over the border, you know, they don't really get any. They just get the tickets at whatever price. We're paying the ticket price plus effectively the subsidy on there. So that could be addressed, and that may help, because the only way is to increase the number of people getting through there. That's the only thing that's really going to help them. I think they're fairly limited into actually putting more on there, because it is quite difficult to fit things in. It's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle with any of those sort of facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tilbury. We're happy to have a conversation with your colleague Overton Overton Rugby Club, so that we can make sure. Recreation Centre, so that we can, in the monitoring information, pick up where they have other service users. Not a problem at all. When the Anvil and the Haymarket came together, there are a number of ways in which they've been more efficient in terms of, you know, one management company looking after the whole of both operations, etc. So that we have evidence that has improved, and they obviously make business decisions based on the best interest of the organisation. So I can only assume that that's why they've made decisions for things like ceasing the cafeteria area, etc. In the past. I think it is an ongoing conversation that we need to have with them about how we move forward, what we do differently in the future. We talked earlier about improving outcomes for residents, so I think it's absolutely appropriate that we have a conversation about our subsidy and whether or not there are any potential options for looking at how residents might benefit from those improved outcomes. So we're happy to have those conversations.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 47 of 165, the Milestones Museum, and now it's added Basing View, but Basing View didn't used to be an issue previously. the first line of the document says, Milestone Museum was purpose-built to house the County Council's Transport and Social History collection. Why are we providing any support to a County Council project? Thank you.
Forgive me, I wasn't involved in the project when it was initially put forward. No, so if let me finish, Councillor. So I don't know what the agreement was between the County Council and ourselves. I understand it was a partnership in order to have that particular museum and that collection in the borough of Basingstoke and Deane, and it has proved to be a very attractive proposition for the borough. There are, as with all of the organisations, ongoing conversations about how that might change in the future and what the options are for moving forward.
How much has County Council contribution been reduced by?
Sorry, do you mean how much are we proposing to...
How much has the County Council contribution been reduced by?
I can't answer that question, but I can get back to you.
I would certainly say it's a significant omission not to have the other side of the equation. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Open to debate, please. I think, we have some, yep. Good. I mean, what I was going to say was, I think, having read through the report, it's clear that there's an immense amount of work, as Councillor Parker's said, has been done, and a comprehensive knowledge of those individual organisations that we support. I think it's comforting that we have had regular communications with all of these organisations, that we have had the workshops, and these processes have taken along the process, which has kept everybody well informed. And really, each organisation, as we've said, is very, very different. And therefore, I would sort of strongly support this case of us taking a case-by-case approach in terms of how we've adjusted their funding. I think we now have two speakers. Yes, Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Chair. The thing that dwarfs all this is the Anvil Arts budget, which is over £1 million and 40% of the budget. But also, it says that under half the people from Basingstoke use it, and then other people in surrounding areas. There's nothing wrong in that in itself, because it advertises the town and brings people into the town. But when are we going to look at this? I mean, to cut it by 8%, it's not a significant amount of money. I mean, what worries me is that all that money's going on the Anvil, yet we're cutting CAB, victim support, neighbour care, all the frontline services, charities and such that our people need. So is there no scope to move some of the money from the Anvil to these?
I'm not sure where that question is sent, because we've finished questions to the officer. I think we know what you said. It's an out-loud thought. Fine. I think as we sort of go back and say that it has been a case by case. The officers and the team have a sort of intimate knowledge of those organisations and why the adjustments. And I think, again, in terms of the Anvil, it's been indicated that there is work to be done there, and it's ongoing. And of course, it is the biggest job because it's the biggest draw on a pot of funding. Thanks. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I have concerns about the approach adopted to determining how much funds we give to some of these people. If we're going to introduce a reduction in support by a specific line item, i.e. 10% or 15% of what, that's understandable in accounting terms and in budgeting terms. And if we had applied a routine, standard approach, that would be understandable in accounting terms and budgeting terms. But we haven't. One of the criteria appears to be how much they have asked for. Now, I think that that's not necessarily the right criteria to apply when you're talking about dishing out millions of pounds of public money. I think that having got to the 4th or 5th year of an economic recession that is affecting people in terms of their ability to pay bills, that is affecting people in terms of their ability to survive on occasions, that we should be, as a criteria, ensuring that we protect the frontline services that apply to people who are at the border level in terms of poverty or support in terms of victims. I do believe that it is wrong, absolutely wrong, to ask people how much they can accept as a cut and then apply our own judgment. If we apply that to everything, most people, including the anvil, would say, oh, we can't manage without all your money. And that's not a good criteria. The criteria should include, like, should we be giving you any money? Are you reliant upon us to exist on the basis of that we're a public body which raises money and imposes that raising of the money by law? Should we be giving you voluntarily £1 million? And should we be cutting funds to victim support? Should we be cutting funds to the CAB, which is a critical service, and not cutting funds to people like reducing the support to the anvil by less than most others? Now, I've got nothing against the anvil. Neither do I have anything against the milestones. But the milestones is a county council project, and we're giving them loads of money. We ought to know what the county council is doing, because it could well be that they're cutting their funding for their project, and we're making up the gap. It could well be. I believe that the community support services of the different schools need support, should get support, and I will come back to you, Natalie, later on this week, I hope, to talk about the allegation or suggestion from me that the Oldwood Science College was told that there had no money to be asked for, so they didn't make an application. There's absolutely no doubt that a gymnastic club, which is a voluntary activity, and which is a good activity, should be encouraged, but they should not take precedence over things like CAB or the Cafe Project, for example. They should not take precedence. But apart from that, generally speaking, most of the decisions are in accordance with what I would have expected. But the key ones are the frontline services to support people. And we're not doing that for everyone the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. I mean, again, all I can say there is that what the officers have told us, that the regular monitoring process, monthly or quarterly, whatever it is giving them the tools and the ability to be able to make some of these decisions that they've made. And I think what's come forward from the report, that the officers have worked with these organisations, and that no organisation is coming forward and saying, hey, we're in dire straits if we don't get what we're asking or we don't get nearly. So everybody understands where they are with this, and they say no organisation is saying the suggestions or recommendations are wrong.
If I may say, Chair, I assume that the officers were providing the substance and the information in front of us for us to make the decision. I'm sorry if I was wrong about that, but if I'm asked to provide comments and to make decisions, because that's what I believe we're here to do, to support something, then I'll make a contribution.
Thank you for that contribution. I accept your contribution. I was just trying to also respond and give you a steer in terms of some of the information that is available here. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Just some initial opening comments, and then if I could, I've got tabbed one or two of the organisations I'd just like to make some single comment to. I've been involved in considerable detail in relation to funding requests, and I certainly do believe that this is a partnership ongoing working exercise, and the rigorous quarterly exercise of look, see how you are, where do you want to be, and how you're going to get there, is there to assist organisations in developing their proposition and offering to the community. And it's not really very fair to pick out individual organisations, but certainly there are one or two that I think do merit that. I want to make a comment in relation, first of all, to shop mobility, just to embarrass the Vice Chair, if nothing else. And when you read this, the detailed information about how the organisation is run, it seems to me, and certainly I've made a note of the individual persons' names, that somebody should, and if no one else will, I will, make an approach to both the managers of the Mall and the managers of Festival Place, as regards to perhaps, if they don't already, looking to offer some support, because the report makes it quite clear that there are visitor trips to Basingstoke that are actually only seen to be happening as a result of the existence of shop mobility. And so therefore that's a real aid, I would say, to their businesses. So, and I think it is a very, very good service. If I could then just go on to highlight particularly the cafe project, which in itself I think its business plan, or its community vision, shall we say, I think it's really, really good. And it is we see here the way the process seems to be operating very well, because they've had higher funding in 12, 13, 13, 14. They've actually said we don't need so much. They're indicating that they're in a position not to draw so much from the council's funding, and it's, I think, an organisation that takes one of the biggest reductions. But when you look at the client outcomes detailed in this report, I mean, that just makes really good reading, and they certainly deserve continued support when called for. I was myself just disappointed to see the reduction in victim support, and I think probably there's something ongoing. There could maybe be some further discussions on some other forum in regard to that. The other thing I want just then lastly to talk about is the community furniture project. my understanding, not looking to answer Councillor Keating's question in place of the officer, is that it was a model that was already well in existence in Newbury, and we took effectively their model method of operation, and that's why we still end up with the tag with the Newbury. When you again look at some of the on page 123, 165, I really would draw attention to the exemplary outcome of under intangible benefits of this provision, in as much as the period December through 2010, 2011, there was additional support. Well, I'll just read one or two others. There were 46 volunteers who had high support needs. And just how wonderful is that, to think that here we are, we're giving this opportunity to the disadvantaged and people who need that extra help, and to what long-term benefit we won't be able to even quantify. But even there, 24 placements were provided to school children requiring additional support, and to 28 young people undertaking community service. Several continued volunteering after completing their sentence. Can't put money on that. Thank you very much. Sorry, Chair, so I would say I compliment the officers in all of the work they do with all of the organisations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I'm very keen this committee should do is actually sort of add value, to use the jargon, to this kind of process, and I'd like to make a couple of suggestions, one of which is in a sense a point of information, another sort of proposal in terms of how we go forward that I hope will achieve that. On the sort of point of information, and just to help Councillor Keating, at a point in time when actually I recall both Councillor Keating and I were on the cabinet of this council, and we were on the cabinet around about the time that, you know, Milestones was completed. And the de facto arrangement at the time was that the level of revenue funding between ourselves and the county council was exactly sort of 50-50. So, you know, we should certainly you know, maintain that as a position, and you know, ensure that there's that appropriate balance between what we in the county are contributing as far as Milestones is concerned, and that we're not suffering at the county's expense. The second thing that I wanted to actually put forward as a recommendation, really, for this committee to consider, is actually in relation to the anvil, because you know, we've heard reference to the fact that the anvil's a very significant proportion of the overall funding total. I assume probably that it's, you know, the largest single grant funding arrangement that the council as a whole has. And, you know, we've heard reference, you know, quite appropriately to the fact that there's sort of detailed monitoring by the officers of, you know, the quarterly performance, and a sort of process in place as far as that's concerned. But, you know, one of the things that I'd like to understand, you know, given the level of funding that goes to the anvil, you know, is how what we do in relation to the anvil compares with what other local authorities do, you know, generally, you know, what the performance of the anvil is like in terms of, you know, audience figures, the breadth of its program, you know, those kind of considerations, you know, compared with comparable, you know, arts venues elsewhere in the country. And, you know, I'd like us to have some points of comparison in terms of, you know, comparing the anvil with, you know, other theatres and concert halls elsewhere. I'd like to have a bit of a sort of handle on, you know, how the management, you know, how the anvil operates, say, for example, compared with commercial venues, commercial theatres, and how the subsidy arrangements compare and so on. And I think that the way for us to actually do that would be to do actually something that overview committees haven't done for a number of years. One of the things that overview committees can do under Standing Order 8.2 in the Council's Constitution is they can actually, do their own reviews of things. They can produce their own committee report on a particular issue, which they then send to the portfolio holder for their consideration. And in those circumstances, the portfolio holder is then required to respond back to the committee in writing on the issues raised within the report. If the executive member sort of disagrees with, what the committee is saying in its report, then there's a further process whereby the matter can sort of go to Cabinet under Standing Order 8.10. And I'm not suggesting this, as something that we, do in the next 6 weeks, God forbid. Or that we do with a view to sort of necessarily having any impact on the funding decision that Cabinet will make in just a few weeks' time. But I really think it would be helpful, and in the interests of everyone, certainly in the interests of council taxpayers, and I hope in the interests of the Anvil as well, to actually sort of put some spade work in from this committee and to actually have a report that we perhaps work on over the course of the period in between this time now and this time next year, that actually adds value to the whole process and puts us in a better position to be absolutely confident that we have the balance right between funding for the Anvil and other organisations in the future. So I put forward that as a, as something for the committee's consideration in terms of drawing up its work programme over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the officers for this report as well, because it's very comprehensive. I've got one quibble over the way that it's been done, in that we've looked at all the organisations and said, what is the impact on you of the cuts? What we haven't done is look at the individual organisations and say, well, actually, are there any there that don't really fit purpose anymore? Will we be better off cutting some less and cutting some out completely? If you go into a commercial organisation, when they're looking at their budgets and budget savings, they don't do an overall 10% cut. They'll look at what they're doing and say, right, that part of the organisation isn't making money, let's take it out and use the money somewhere else. That's the efficient way to do it. But we haven't done that in this report because we still work on commercial principles, and we should do. However, what the officers have done, they have looked at what council objectives are being achieved, what the impact assessments are, organisation by organisation, and they are different. So a straightforward across-the-board cut isn't appropriate. Hampshire County Council funding, I agree we should be looking at what the county are doing, but in some cases the county are, at this moment, making the same discussions that we are, and the information isn't available yet. So I don't blame the officers for not having it, if it isn't out there to be had. I suspect it isn't there.
Sorry, Councillor, I think that's absolutely wrong. They did indicate that they asked. They might not have the figure with them here today, but they certainly did.
Yeah. And lastly, when we talk about the Haymarket restaurant, as Ian did, when the Basingstoke Theatre Trust first ran that restaurant, they did it themselves, and it lost money. So they went to David Rose and said, you run the restaurant, you pay us rent, and he ran a restaurant and he made money. When the Anvil took it over, they ran it themselves and they lost money. The answer is, Don't do it yourself. Give it to the professionals to do. They will do it properly. As it is now, we have spent £143,000 on that little bit downstairs where the bar was and the restaurant was put in, and it's now no longer used because it don't make money. Well, there are ways to make money, and putting it out to somebody else would be one of them. And I think we ought to talk to the Amble about that.
Councillor Tory.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Roger's made the point I was sort of making earlier. I think that's the point, is sometimes these things are better run by commercial organisations within that small parts of it there. And I think what John was saying with the Amble, it's a long time since we looked at it in any detail, which given the size, I mean, we take in £6 million a year in council tax, and we've given them over £1 million a year. This is a massive amount of money. It's probably since when we had the big do with when we merged the two, and that was probably the best thing to do is one sort of management structure. I've had differences over the way it was done and who was put in charge and such like, and some of the comments were made at the time and assumptions because they were clearly incorrect, as posterity showed. They were not insolvent, but that's another issue. But I think we need to look at it again because it's a long time since we looked at it relative to other organisations, what's going on, and I fully support what John said there. Looking at on the bigger picture here, well, I think as long as the government's going to carry on with its expansionary fiscal contraction, I suspect we'll be in the same position next year, looking what we're going to cut back. So, and I think one of the comments that I'm surprised Councillor Keating hasn't made, because he usually makes it, is we should look at our reserves, and certainly, even if we're not going to fund all this and say we can do that out of reserve, we should certainly look at the voluntary organisations like this, particularly the CABs, because the actual amount we're cutting from them, the Andover CAB, is a cut of £150. It probably costs more to produce that part of the report than it did to do that and to look into it. That's the reality. It's a small amount of money. The Tadley one, I think, is about £2,500. Even the Basingstoke one is, well, I've got £8. I think I'll take £1,000. They're relatively small amounts of money we should be able to find as a council, because the obvious point is at a time when times are hard and people are struggling, and we know their workload's going up, to take money away from those particular organisations. I think most of the sports organisations probably can cope, and the Silchester Dig will wait another year and those sorts of things. They can wait for better times, but these organisations, they need help now. If anything, we should be increasing their funding. That's the reality. So I certainly can't support a cut in any of those ones there. And I think we need to, the argument is, we keep reserves for a rainy day where someone needs to look out the window and realise it's raining cats and dogs out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to pick up one point there, that you were suggesting that more cuts are on the way as such. An important part of this report tells us that these grants are set for 2 years. So there's not important cuts. Well, but they are set for 2 years. So that's very positive for those organisations to know that's the positive news they're getting, not the news that you'd like them to get, which suggests that it's going to be cut next year. Because in most cases it's not. It's cut for subject. Councillor Cherritt.
Thank you, Chair. I've waited patiently. I think just listening to the points made, it's a recognition that the officer told us at the start that the target level of savings was 15%. And in fairness, we could have done like most other councils have done, and indeed, as Councillor Keating, I think it was, that suggested, we could have taken a view of applying whatever target level we wanted across all organisations evenly and just waiting to see what the consequences were. In reality, I remember when the framework for dealing with the approach to resetting the budgets with grant-funded organisations came through this very committee. And a number of the things that member colleagues have talked about tonight were actually in the gift of this committee to decide, which was included a flat rate cut for everybody, doing it in isolation, doing it without discussion, not doing it at all, actually deciding to pick and choose those that we felt had been around long enough and should be standing on their own 2 feet, and that we would just unilaterally decide not to fund anymore. And actually, it was this committee that gave comment and support to the framework that the officers have actually used in coming up with the solutions they've got before us. So we have actually our own share in the outcome we've got. That said, I think it's quite a good outcome because it's balanced. The actual level of fund reduction ranges from 0% to 78%. All of those funding reductions have been through not just one conversation, but ongoing conversations and consultations with the organisations involved. The point that the officer made about commissioning and changing to that model was that we're now talking to the organisations and saying, look, in the past you might have depended year on year on us handing out cash and not really taking too much interest into how you spend it. You've been relying on us being here and we've been relying on you being there. Actually, times are changing and the relationship has to change. And part of the conversation of commissioning is being able to say to organisations, hang on a minute, there's 3 or 4 of you all applying for grant funding separately, and broadly you're doing the same thing. And the officer reminded us that commissioning is about encouraging those organisations to collaborate and maybe jointly apply for a session of funding based on the outcomes we need them to achieve. That's not telling them how to run their business. That's not telling them what to do and when to do it. That's saying this is what our residents need based on our priorities and our outcomes that we need to achieve. We don't think you're acting wisely in competing against each other for the same slice of an ever-diminishing pot of funding. Why don't you work better together? That's exactly what we're being told as an authority. And we're simply engaging our commissioned organisations and our grant-funded organisations to do exactly the same. And they have responded maturely. The conversations that they have fed back to the officers throughout this process have been ones that, where it has really hurt and put their business at risk, they have said so. The fact that the council's listened because they've pursued a 12%, not a 15%, so no, we're not hitting our funding target. That means we do have a budget shortfall, which you have to find from somewhere else. That tends to mean that this has been a general two-way conversation. That's a different position than we've been in the past. It shows a maturity of the council and of the organisations in being able to deal with the public funding in the way that we should deal with it. That doesn't mean to say there are still anomalies, and I hear very strongly the same messages about the anvil. I hear Councillor Shaw's suggestion about a review, and it's within the gift of this committee to consider that. What I would say, though, is that the anvil isn't just something that takes money. It's also an organisation that brings money into this area. It generates income for this town in a way that perhaps we choose to overlook time and again. Its mere presence as a concert venue, as a cultural venue, gives this council reputation, presence, and even world-class sight and recognition that we wouldn't otherwise have. So when we look at these things in a grant funding round, we mustn't lose sight of the overall context. I would say that because I'm thinking of an organisation I've been working with recently, another district council, who had a similar venue, certainly not as prestigious as the Anvil in their area, and through years of grant funding reductions resulted in their theatre and concert venue actually going into mothballs. They've had an eyesore sitting in their town square for a long time doing absolutely nothing. They've had to invest an awful lot of money to bring it back into use, and it's taken strong leadership, political and executive, working with the community to get a return now on that investment. Yes, they're grant funding it. Why? Because they recognise the venue actually brings more than just a grant fund obligation. It brings income, culture, learning, growth and opportunity to the town. So I would say, yes, perhaps it is timely that we think about a review with Councillor Shaw's proposal, that we think about how best we undertake that through this committee, but we also think about it in the broader context than just simply looking at the level of grant it gets and saying that's disproportionate. I would commend the officers for the work on the report. I would certainly commend them for engaging the variety of organisations in the way that they have throughout the last 12 months, because it has changed the nature of the relationship we've had, and I think the word partnership was used by colleagues earlier on. This is a resetting of a partnership. It's an ongoing partnership conversation, and one that I hope will bring much better outcomes in the future, recognising that we're all about trying to get the right for our communities with the best level of investment we can offer, but without creating a culture of dependency that others don't bother think about where this money comes from and where it goes. I'd like to think this paper has taken us in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back again. Regarding the Anvil yet again, I did mention earlier, but I remember in a bygone era, as some people might remember, I was a member of the Cabinet with Councillor Shaw many years ago. And one of the things he used to do, I was responsible for economic prosperity in Basingstoke. and we was prosperous at the time, and thankfully we still are relatively, it's that we used to use the anvil to sell the town. And, and quite rightly what the councillor said, and we used to use it quite a lot. But then I think the subsidy we give was, I think, £900,000, £1 million until about 10, 11 years ago. I mean, and then to the A market we give, I think, £150,000. So it's about the same now. So in real terms, with inflation, might have gone down. But the point is, it's been a continuous problem. The funding, justifying the funding of the anvil. It's the events right. I go once or twice a year, but it's the pricing right. I mean, what would happen if you cut the budget to £500,000? If you cut that, would it be a total collapse? I take what the council said about some places you have too many cuts, you can it can become tatty, and that's the last thing we want. I noticed that the lease is up in 2016. I mean, comparatively, the nearest one to us is the Exton. I only went to Exton 2 years ago, I think, the last time I went there in Reading, and I thought it was cold, soulless, and pretty awful, actually. We don't want to go like that. And I hope it's been done up since then. I doubt if it has. No, it's pretty awful. So I don't want to go that way. So that was one of Councillor Shaw's better suggestions. Was actually, I agree with him for once. That we, I think the review. We need to look at all continuing where the money goes, and the structure management and the maintenance of the place. I think we're responsible for the outside, aren't we? I think that's something if I can remember. So we look at that. But coming back to the coalface of stuff, I mean, I can't support the cuts to those frontline services, specifically the CAB. I mean, I'll repeat again, the welfare reform bill comes in in all its obnoxious ways in April, and the cuts, people start getting letters and knowing about the cuts, the room tax, etc. They start building up now to April, and our work will go through the roof, as will have some of us councillors. And that's why they need the funding. They don't need to be monitored and followed through. I can tell you that they don't need to monitor them. They're going to be overwhelmed, and they would tell you that. So I would say, I plead to keep the standstill budget at least for CAB. Otherwise, I can't vote for this paper.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Natalie's working hard, obviously, to come forward with some recommendations for us. It's clear that the anvil is featured, and it's because it is a big spend, etc. So I think it's clear that we're all supporting some form of more intimate knowledge about the anvil, following into probably a review. But certainly, I think we're looking for more intimate knowledge about the anvil, the way it works. And I think from what the officer was saying earlier, of course, there's still a lot of ongoing work, and it's probably good that this committee gets to hear of that ongoing work and that process. And I noticed that Councillor J. Warden has come forward and is anxious to speak, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Only if everyone else has sort of, had as much of a say as they wish to this evening. Please do.
Thank you, Renan. I'm the chairman, of course.
I just wanted to pick up on some of the points that have been raised, because I have been listening to the debate, and I take some of those points on board that have been made. First, I join with Councillor Cherrett, Gardner and Parker in welcoming the report, and I do think that the officers have done a lot of good work here to bring a good level of detail to us. Yes, there'll always be additional questions that we think of on the night that we want answers to, and I know they'll provide those answers, but I think this is a good paper. And I just, as a result of the paper being brought to us, there have been a number of points made on different sides of the argument. I think Councillor Gardner's point around ensuring that we take a completely fresh look at services that we provide and grants that we make is entirely the right one. I think it's important that we're always focused on delivering what residents need, and they tell us what they need through various consultations that we undertake and so on, and I think it's right that we always ensure we're reacting to that. And I think that part of going through the commissioning process will allow us to do just that in the years ahead. And in relation to Councillor Gardner's other point around the restaurant, which I thought was a point well made, I think that it would be right for officers to go back and just make this point to the Anvil now, but indeed it could feed into any review that the committee may wish to do going forward as part of the wider review of the Anvil, if that's the committee's wish. Reserves were mentioned, and they're often mentioned at committees and at the council, and my view has always been consistent in this, that reserves that the council holds are very important for two reasons. First, we do spend money to provide services above and beyond what a lot of districts do, and as a result it is right from a financially sort of prudent perspective to maintain a level of reserves. It's also important that we recognise the investment reserves we maintain generate a financial return for the council, therefore for the residents, which keeps their council tax the lowest in Hampshire and one of the lowest in the country. So it's important that we don't squander reserves now and force residents to pay council tax later. Dealing with financial prudence and financial issues, I think that, and I welcome the point that was made earlier, that this is a 2-year settlement that we're providing now for organisations, and I think that stability that we're providing organisations will be useful to them in planning their budgets in the year ahead. But then dealing with the figures themselves, I just want to make it absolutely clear. We asked everyone the same questions, we followed the same methodology, and we asked everyone what would happen if they had a 15% cut, which, as Councillor Cherrett said, was the original proposal overall. But what would also happen if they faced a reduction of 20 or 100%? And that applied from everyone from the Anvil to Andover CAB, to draw two very different organisations. Now, the Anvil is taking an 8% reduction. I completely agree with what Councillor Cherrett said, that the Anvil brings a huge amount of added benefits to the town and to the borough that are not immediately noticeable on a financial bottom line within the council. And that has to be taken into consideration amongst other factors when making any decision. And the 8% reduction is less than the overall average of 12%, but it's more than a lot of others. Indeed, it is more than the CAB, which is being reduced by 5%. Now, the Anvil being a large grant, an 8% reduction is the largest still in absolute terms, compared with much smaller organisations, which, as the point was made, I think maybe Councillor Tilbury made the point that often we're talking about small amounts from a percentage that is detailed here. However, I do hear what Councillor Regan and Tilbury said around frontline services. I do think it is a point that we must bear in mind. And I recognise that the CAB does a lot of good work for the residents here. I recognise that there may be residents who need increased services in the months and years ahead. So I will take that point on board and reflect on it as we move forward through the budget process. So I just thank members for the debate and their contribution this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think I don't think we need
Is
to
that
ask
a promise
questions.
that you'll review the?
I said we would not ask questions. We want to move along a little bit. Thank you.
Well, what's wrong with asking him a question?
Just I don't.
I thought we had to have a collaborative discussion. You afraid to ask the questions?
Councillor Jowell, would you answer the one question? Thank you.
I will reflect on what has been said here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Nobody else? Good. Could ask them. Well, could you give Natalie and Shelley a couple of seconds, just because obviously Natalie has presented the report tonight and has been scribbling all of her notes, etc. So I'm just going to give her a couple of minutes just to confer with Shelley that they've picked up all of the points for us. Thank you, members. I think we're there, so if I can pay your attention to Natalie. Thank you.
Okay, members, please let me know if there is anything that I've missed. There was obviously quite a lengthy debate. In summary, the comments from the committee are that we're reassured that the regular communication has taken place with organisations and that most proposals are funded for 2 years. Reference envelopes, a request that consideration is given to look at how funding might be delivered differently and perhaps review this through the committee, recognising that the ANVIL also generates income and contributes to the reputation of the borough, and if it is to be reviewed, we need to think wider than just grant funding. Concern that criteria needs to address what areas should be protected, especially those that support vulnerable people or victims, and that other organisations should not take precedence over this. Community schools should continue to get support. Rigorous monitoring on a quarterly basis highlights that this is indeed a partnership approach. There are a number of organisations that would benefit from further conversations, for example, the Males and Festival Place about shop mobility. Compliment the officers on the report and the work that is being done with the organisations. There should be a balanced contribution between Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for milestones. We should take a fresh look at all the organisations we currently fund and whether or not we continue to support those organisations in the future. This council should look at reserves and how we can support organisations that offer frontline services. A number of organisations were highlighted for their good work, and those include the Cafe Project, Victim Support and the Community Furniture Project. Positive that a 15% target had been proposed, and that we could have taken a blanket approach to trying to achieve this, but haven't. This has been a genuine two-way conversation. The framework for assessing the grant funding was taken through the overview process, and there was an opportunity to be involved in setting that criteria. And positive moves forward that commissioning means we are having different conversations with organisations based on better outcomes for the community.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. When you refer to the milestones, I was specifically referring essentially to the fact that the borough and the county council make a contribution to the running costs. And I was using that as an example in general principle, because there may well be other organisations where the county and the borough also contribute, that we should have the balancing facts together. So I think that would be a helpful change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you've found another side to our list.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. That's helpful. Just for clarity, that comment reads, there should be a balanced contribution between Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for milestones and other organisations where both the County Council and the Borough Council fund.
I wasn't saying a balanced contribution. I was saying that we should know what the contributions are, rather than a balanced one, because they're two totally different things.
Point made. Thank you. Yep. Councillor Garth.
On that point, there may be organisations which we do both fund, but we don't fund them equally. And I don't think we need to switch everything to equal funding.
No, that's not really what I'm saying. For equal information.
Yes.
Yes, I quite agree.
Sorry, we can change that to there should be an understanding of the contributions made where both organisations fund.
Specification of the contribution.
Knowledge. Yeah. Knowledge of.
Knowledge is that they fund something. Knowledge that they funded to the tune of 5 million is difficult.
Okay, so what they actually fund. And sorry, forgive me, members, I've turned my page and I forgot to look at it. There's concern about reductions in funding to the CABs, especially in light of the current welfare reforms.
Thank Thank you, members. I think that brings us to the end. Councillor Shaw, is this still on the same?
It was just a question of timing, Chair, because I'm aware that one of the things we're required to do as a committee understanding orders is produce our annual work programme each year. And it's that meeting which would be, an appropriate time to, follow through in terms of what we discussed in relation to the anvil alongside, anything else that we chose to look at over the course of the 12 months. And I just wanted to sort of get a recollection on what meeting we would be carrying out that responsibility, i.e. reviewing our annual work programme. Standing Order 8.6.
Chair, I think we'll need to check when that will be and come back to members of the committee, which we can do. We'll look into that tomorrow for you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We now move to paper C, which is the vision for Central Basingstoke, an update on the action plan, which John Dawson will present for us.
Thank you, Chair. This report gives progress made against various projects in the Vision for Central Basingstoke Action Plan. It also brings to the attention of the committee the establishment of a specific town centre project. This project has its own project manager on a temporary appointment, and it also has a specific budget with a focus on implementing improvements in the town centre in the short and the longer term. Turning first to the various strategies that we have for the town centre, this is page 4. We're looking here at this initiation of the town centre project. It's proposed to achieve an improvement to the rest of the town centre and the top of town, in particular, by establishing a new specific town centre project. Budget provision has been proposed by Cabinet in October 2012 in the medium-term financial strategy. This amounts to around £580,000 in 2013-15, that 2-year period, of which about 425,000 will comprise works to improve the town centre. One key aspect of this project is the appointment of a town centre project manager. It is very much expected to very shortly appoint that manager. The second key aspect of this project is the creation of a town centre programme. This is a set of actions that we wish to implement over the next 2 years, and it will benefit from a specific budget. We go into that in a bit more detail later on. To assist with this town centre project, a town centre members advisory panel has been established. The first meeting of the map took place in December. This map, the scope of the map has been widened from simply examining the top of town area to include the whole of the town centre. It's proposed that the final version of the town centre programme, that's this programme of actions to be implemented over the next 2 years, will be brought to this committee for consideration by May this year. Turning now to some other strategies, Basing View. One of the key advances has been that Muse Developments have been selected as the development partner for the regeneration of Basing View. The development agreements between Muse and the Council for the multi-site partnership for the whole of Basing View, but also the Gateway site, were exchanged last month. Turning now to page 6 and short-term actions. Just a quick word about this town centre programme that I mentioned. It is intended to provide a particular focus on improving the top of town for implementation in 2013-15, but also beyond. The projects to be identified are expected to draw upon the High Street Innovation Fund consultation, which is the subject of the following report, Report D, next one on. The projects are expected to benefit from the High Street Innovation Fund and also additional budgetary provision which is being proposed. Examples of projects which are currently under consideration include environmental improvements to the street and shop frontages, measures to attract independent retailers, improvements to the market, refurbish vacant shops, promotion of the town centre, also how do we create a draw to the market square. Again, just to remind, it is proposed that the final version of this programme will be brought to this committee for consideration by May. Moving further down the page, just one or two key short-term actions. Gresley Road, we are expecting a planning application from Network Rail for their regional campus to be submitted very shortly in this month. Turning over the page, page 7, the nighttime economy, bottom of the page. This is to bring to members' attention that a Purple Flag Award is given by the Association for Town Centre Management in recognition of the quality of town centres in the evening. We've heard of the Green Flag Award for the quality of our parks. This is the Purple Flag Award for the quality of how our nighttime economy is managed. An application for this award, it says in the report, is expected to be made in January. This application was made last week, and it is hoped that we will learn the outcome by March. Moving finally onto the medium and longer term focus projects, page 9. I want to speak just particularly about Central Car Park. In the previous update of the action plan that was reported to this committee back in July, the update referred to how the redevelopment of Central Car Park was considered to offer one of the most significant opportunities to enhance the core of the town centre through development-led improvements. We've taken advice on this matter, but it is concluded that there's very little demand for additional retail space in the short to medium term. It's therefore considered that the site nevertheless still offers an important land resource which may meet the longer term retail needs of the town centre. For this reason, it is proposed that the site remains as a car park in the short to medium term until the longer term needs of the town centre become clearer and the economic climate improves. Having said that, however, we are very mindful that there are local residents, such as those along New Road, who are affected by the future of this site. A meeting between representatives of the council and residents is therefore proposed very soon, and we hope to arrange a meeting in February. And at that meeting, we wish to discuss with the residents their aspirations for their properties and how the council may address their concerns and wishes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Questions for the officer? Councillor Washbourne.
Thank you, Chair. A question on page 132 of 165, paragraph 4.2, talks about the appointment of the project manager for the 2 years, but it doesn't actually say where the money's coming from. I wonder if you could actually enlighten us on that.
Just turning to my separate notes. The funding for the project manager post is mentioned in Annex A, Appendix G, as a one-off revenue priority allocation strategic projects that is contained in the medium-term financial strategy. The project manager is part of a bid for £375,000, but this bid will also include a many-down project manager, and this is for funding for these projects over 2 years, and it's not just the salary, but it's additional costs as well. So that is a new bid in the medium-term financial strategy.
Okay, can I just ask a further question?
You may.
Thank you. On page 142 of 165, read the town centre project. Is it likely that the boundary of the town centre will be altered by part of this project?
Sorry, for clarification, which page was that of 165?
142.
Sorry, where you look? Sorry, may I ask where you're looking? That's
Yes, at the top of the page, as Councillor Keating said.
Excuse me, is this reference S1, the town centre project, or is it under the local plan possibly?
Yeah, I do apologise. Yes, under the local plan.
I think this is possibly page, maybe something's with the page numbering. I've got this on page 144 of 165. Yes, it does say that changes to the current town centre boundary are being considered as part of the review of the local plan in order to facilitate additional development required to meet changing needs over the planned period. All I can say at the moment is that that is under consideration, and obviously the final proposal from officers will have to be considered in due course by P&I committee before the pre-submission version of the local plan is agreed by council and put out to public consultation. But one thing that is being looked at here is extending the town centre boundary.
Thank you. I think that answers my questions. Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Cherry.
I'd say if you allow me to interject, because I think it's relevant to Councillor Washbourne's previous question, the answer we've just had. In an earlier EPP where Councillor Laura James was visiting, I believe she talked about the extension of boundaries, and subsequently the officer provided a helpful plan which overlaid existing boundaries and new boundaries. Can I just check that that's the actual, there's not something new, that's the actual change of boundary that's currently going through the P&I process, that there's not something additional to that at the moment, because just for continuity.
I can't prejudge what is currently going through the current P&I process. The plan that was produced last year for Councillor Laura James was referring back to, I believe, a previous draft when we went out on the core strategy back in, I think it was February last year, to 12. So that was the extension of the town centre boundary being considered then. Whether that is precisely the same as the one being considered now, I think we'll have to wait a couple of months before we come back to P&I before we can say whether it's precisely the same boundary change that's been considered or not.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. In the light of the question from fellow members of the committee with regard to the boundary, the question then to the officer would be, for purposes of this report, and to therefore be clear as to the implications of the various headings that we're looking at under this paper, could we be sent subsequent a map that actually relates to this particular report, so that when there is a suggested extension to that particular boundary, we'll have some thoughts of comparison. And I would ask the chair, would the chair not really feel that as this particular committee is looking at the implications of the vision for central Basingstoke, that we should also be part of the consultation with regard to any proposed extension to the map boundaries?
Yes, I can have a look at that and then send the information out.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. My first question is in relation to page 133 of 165, which is paragraph 4.9, the public realm guidance. And is a very simple question: why is this work going to be effectively almost 12 months late?
I understand that it is because the team that are undertaking that guidance have had to concentrate more on the preparation of the green infrastructure strategy, which is needed as part of the evidence base to support the local plan. And so therefore the green infrastructure strategy has been considered to be a greater priority, and therefore the public realm guidance has stepped back.
Thank you very much. That's noted. My next question then would be, so that we can be quite clear, and I do thank you for your response to my question ahead of this meeting, but so that other members are sort of able also to understand that what we are actually talking about in regard to page 134 of 165 under the short-term action required, 0 to 2 years, that the budget available for improvements, excluding the cost of the appointment of the top of town manager, for the years 2013-15 is actually £425,000. If you could confirm that, please.
Yes, that is the current figure in the medium-term financial strategy, subject obviously to approval of the budget for next year.
Lovely little caveat. I have more, Chair, if I may just. Then I do then go on to page 135 of 165, and I would ask the officer if under paragraph 5.8 consideration could be given to also the middle strip of Churchill Way, which is looking very tired, very patchy, and as a sort of gateway into the town through to the Eastlock Central roundabout isn't a very good advert for people travelling to park in Festival Place. So I would ask if perhaps that could be also looked at, I guess probably jointly in conjunction with our fellow Hampshire County Council officers.
May I take it that this means the central reservation inside the dual carriageway? Yes, I can confirm that there certainly has been noted, its state, by officers, and there has been discussion about it. I'll pass this on to the relevant officers to see what action can be taken as soon as possible.
Little quick questions, and obviously a very capable officer of giving us good answers. Well, he's bigger than me. Again on page 135, under the nighttime economy, where it's talking about the action plan, brings together the various elements of the nighttime economy as one project, including licensing, taxi provision, community safety, and management of the street environment. I would ask the officer, would it not also be relevant to incorporate planning?
I think that planning certainly has a role to play, and there should be the appropriate cross-references. May I inquire if this reference is talking about, for example, planning controls on the loss of ordinary shops to restaurants, bars, solicitors' offices, betting shops, that sort of thing?
Yes, certainly that's one aspect of it. As a town centre ward member, I have first-hand involvement with regard to a need to maybe strengthen the direction that planning can influence the development of the public realm. And if we don't incorporate planning in that aspect, we end up with certain situations where, as one example, outside seating areas, often the application for and the influence that officers can have on the outcome depends very much on which direction the application comes into the council. If it comes into the council under planning application, then the licensing team can't have any influence in relation to necessarily the design, the area, and the incorporation of tapping rails. So I do think there's an overlap, and yes, it is, John, in relation to where do we want to see the development in the sense of allowance of concentration of certain retail aspects, certain business types, and how planning guidance can be either changed or strengthened.
I'll certainly take those points on board and discuss them with Linda Cannon, Head of Licensing, who is in charge of the nighttime economy work, and also Andrew Hunter in terms of planning policy, and so how planning can be integrated into the consideration of the nighttime economy works and licensing. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I would also then stay on 135, seems to be one of my favourite pages. The same paragraph, 5.9, says that the outcome, this is in relation to, separately, a report of the future of public conveniences was considered by Housing and Environment, refers to following work to be undertaken, following further consultation, and the report, the outcome of the consultation will be presented to Housing and Environment in 2013. I just wanted to ask for some sort of indication. Are we talking early, are we talking middle, or towards the end?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can take advice and inform members of the committee.
Thank you very much.
Yes, the last one, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, for the time being. I go then to, I thank the officer for paying particular reference to the central car park, page 137. And I want to really take opportunity to clarify the time frame here, because we just heard in a previous paragraph reference that short term in this plan is 0 to 2 years. We see in paragraph 6 the heading medium to long term focuses 3 to 10 plus years, and in paragraph 6.3 the officer refers to, for this reason it is proposed that the site remains as a car park in the short to medium term. And I can't really then see where there's room for a short to medium term in those categories, and maybe the officer, I think it's very, very important for the benefit of residents living on the edge of the site to understand what the officer's perceptions are of short to medium. In years, please.
There's not been written down anywhere a specific definition of what is medium. One assumes it's more than 3 and somewhere between 3 and 10 plus. If you want, I shall give you an informal view now. I doubt very much whether there will be any prospect of retail development on that site, certainly in the short term, so that's 0 to 2 years. In terms of whether it would be in the medium or long term, and where those divisions are, we don't know. We're partly at the mercy of the market, the economic climate, and various other factors. It will certainly be more than 3 years. I'm afraid that because of that uncertainty, I am not able at this point to say, oh yes, it will definitely be more than 10 years, or it will be more than 15 years, or it will be more than 7 years before we could possibly see a retail, a mixed development involving retail on that site. I'm sorry that I cannot be more specific, and I do appreciate the concerns that have been raised by residents, indeed, which have also been voiced at this committee back in, I believe, September 11. It's for this reason that we're having this meeting shortly with residents, but I'm afraid it's really not possible to say beyond 5 or so years whether we can expect a development there or not.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to raise an issue that's not in the paper, but does relate to the town centre. And this is not a new issue that I'm raising. This is one that I have raised previously.
This is a question to the officer, yes?
Yes. I'm just preambling it. Do you like preamble? Nice idea. I believe that the town centre is impacted seriously on occasions by the fact that the central ring road, the inner ring road around the town, goes down to one lane at the bottom of New Road, where the entrance to the indoor car park is. I know I've sat in queues down as far as the Anvil, when I've been coming in from the west side of town, trying to get around to the top of town. All of the traffic moves normally, even at peak times, moves normally. There is movement, but when people want to go up New Road towards the police station or this particular building, there is a blockage if the traffic is heavy and people want to get into the indoor car park. I believe that the inner circle road, which is 2 lanes all the way around, apart from that one particular blockage, it should be two lanes all the way around. Now, I do accept and understand that there are significant impediments to widening the road at that particular point. There are 2 big buildings, one of which is the festival place, and the other one is the flats on the corner. But I think it needs to be looked at, seen to, and addressed as part of the central town vision. The second part that I wanted to raise is the issue about the central car park. The one thing that we've done recently, and I mean years, not months, is we have confirmed to the residents of New Road that we have a very clear perception that the central car park will be developed with a combination of retail and some parking. That's what we're effectively saying to the public now, and that's what we're not saying to the public previously. And that effectively confirms to the residents of New Road that we have a vision that behind them there will be some development in terms of retail development, but we don't know when. But we do have some indicators. Today's news about the closure of last week's news about Jessop's and this week's news about HMV quite clearly indicate that there will be substantial spare capacity in the town itself in the what I would call medium to long term, because it depends on the economy, of course. But some of the closures to date have been significantly related to the internet and purchasing things on the internet. Cameras, for example, we've all got a camera now, we didn't used to before, and of course HMV in terms of music download and matters of that nature. So the culture and the opportunities to develop the town is going to be impacted by anything of that nature. So I believe we have a duty and a right to meet the residents of New Road, not just to hear yet again that their houses are blighted, that their ability to involve themselves in enhancing their properties or developing their properties or even selling them on occasions, that we have a duty to them to find solutions to their concerns, not just listen to them again. Thank you, Chair.
I didn't.
The question is, are we going to listen to them about what we can do about their housing, not just listen to them?
Are we going to listen to them? You said
And do
not just
something
listen
about
to
it.
them. I think the officers indicated there is.
We have listened. We have listened to the people of New Road year after year after year. We've never done anything about it for them. Thank you.
I can assure Councillor Keating, as well as listening, we will see what we can do to provide a solution.
Thank you, members. I've got no more indications of questions for John, so we'll move into the debate. Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Chair. 3 points, really. One is obviously, something that is of interest to my residents is the top of town area, because, I think there's a general perception that, there are a number of empty units. There are some shops that have been there for a long period of time that have recently closed. And there's been an increase, most recently in the number of sort of betting shops and so on. And, a number of units have been empty for some period of time. And I really do urge on the council the importance of, the units that it has ownership of, and actually getting people into those units, because from my perspective, an empty shop unit is not only, a waste of resources, it's also a potential sort of blight on the area, and, I really think that the council ought to make every effort to, attract, lettings, even if they're for relatively short periods of time, because from my perspective, it's far better to have someone in there, even if only for a short time, rather than have a property empty. So I make that particular point. We also have a couple of points on the sort of car parks, and I think there is this sort of continuing uncertainty that's evident in the report about, exactly what the borough does or doesn't intend in terms of the town centre car parks, and there's a real sort of ambivalence on the part of the administration about, what it might or might not do for the as far as the car park is concerned, and I really urge on the administration, greater clarity about what it intends to do or not do as far as the car parks are concerned. And that's particularly relevant, in terms of the central car park and the impact on residents, because I know, having been on the council for a number of years, I don't actually see any appreciable difference in terms of what the council is saying to residents in New Road, from the position about 10 years ago, and the basic position seems to be, well, we think something will happen, but it will happen sometime in the future, and it is actually within the administration's power to say, we're not intending to do anything for the next 5 years, or we're not intending to do anything for the next 10 years, or whatever, and to actually sort of say, and to sort of make some clearer statement of intention than the one that exists at the moment. And I think also, interrelated with this whole issue of car parks, is that some of what has happened in the town centre has been somewhat piecemeal, and I think of the the McCarthy and Stone development, the Majestic Warehouse, proposal for the hotel, all within a fairly confined area. And the general impression that I get from the sort of occurrence of those three developments is of a situation where things are happening piecemeal, sometimes against the wishes of the council, and particularly against the wishes of elected members on the council. And I think that there is a degree of drift that is happening that the administration could do quite a bit to resolve in everybody's interest, not least of residents, by being more proactive, seizing the initiative, being clearer about what its intentions are, rather than, as seems to be in the case at the moment, sort of biding its time, because it is a very challenging period. There are some long-term changes happening in retail. There are whole categories of shop that are basically ceasing to exist. And it really requires some very sort of clear and strategic thinking about, well, what's the quantity of shops going to be in 10 or 20 years compared with the quantity of shops now? What kind of shops are still going to exist in 20 years' time? What kind of shops are not going to exist in 20 years' time? And how do we actually sort of respond to that? And I think that's the thing that is really sort of lacking at the moment. And it's a political issue more than anything else, really, in the sense that, vision for central Basingstoke, to me, means actually thinking about, well, what is happening long term, what does it all mean in terms of the sort of impact on the local area, what is possible, what is not possible, and actually having sort of greater clarity and direction than we currently have from the administration. So I just urge that.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I take that as a support for 2.2 in the recommendations? Councillor Parker.
If I could respond on that as you asked me, Chair. 2.2 is fine, but in a sense, the project that's being talked about in terms of this particular post, the action plan is a period of 2 years. I'm fine with having a plan for the next 2 years and taking some specific steps that are clear. But really what is, I think, fundamentally lacking, and it's a political issue and an issue for sort of cabinet members really, is, well, what are we doing in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and how does what we do in the next 2 years fit in with that?
I'm going to ask John just to come back in there, because I think he gives a little bit of clarity for us.
Just on that last point, Councillor Shaw, I just wish to confirm that it's the town centre programme, as indeed you mentioned, that has initially a 2-year focus. But it's actually part of this much longer term town centre project that will indeed look at 10 years and beyond. So I do know that the sorts of questions you've been asking, what do we want for the town centre, how can we improve it, and I'm mindful of what you were saying about retail mix and so forth and so on. They're just the sorts of questions that I do understand are going to be looked at.
Thank you for that, John. Councillor Parker, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I will endeavour to keep the emotions calm when talking to this paper. The one very thing that is missing throughout the whole paper, apart from some very brief sort of headings, is the residential community. This is my first point. And over the years of the Central Vision panel meetings, I've pressed the various chairs at the time, and there's been several of them, to ensure that there's some sort of ring-fenced comment that says we will address the need of the residents currently living in the town centre area, in the top of town, and those that are no doubt shortly to move in. And my colleague John here has just briefly mentioned a couple, but I have them here listed. Of McCarthy and Stone, 97 flats, New Street, Cross Street, 10 flats, New Road, Winchester Street, 6 flats, Feathers Yard, 24 flats. Now these are all within the top of town area map. These are people being encouraged to live in the area that we're discussing now. We've got a lot of words about the nighttime economy, viability, what we desire for the profit money-making aspects of this council's function. But again, who gets left behind? The residents. We have a mention on page, now this is difficult with these page numbers here, 140, under the introduction for the council's vision. I mean, I think we pretty well have visioned out here in Basingstoke and Dean, and I'm talking about vision as to whether we can see through the misty glasses, not some sort of aspiration of properties built in the clouds. It says under 1.1, fourth spot, ensure through continued action set out in Basingstoke at night. Well, here's a new one, Basingstoke at night. That enhanced vitality, accessibility and character and appearance is compatible with town centre living. And I put a question, I didn't ask John because I wasn't keen to put him on the spot, but my question mark, and this is my comment to officers and to the portfolio holder, is how. I'd like to see demonstrated throughout this particular document how we're going to do that. When are we going to actually consider what the residential aspect of this area, what the residents, what do they want? What they certainly don't want, I can tell you, but I don't know. Have we really asked what do they want? We've got consultations about how people want to spend £100,000. I'm talking about peace at night, quiet, livability, safe area. So that's, in my view, an aspect. I don't have to, if I go on and then mention, I mean, we look at a sort of a community population here of probably in excess of 1,500 people. We've got the Danes, Crown Heights, it was mentioned by somebody. The Danes, right on the edge of it, over the road from Festival Place. Crown Heights, Skyline Plaza, all the issues that they have to address with regard to the nighttime economy. Where is their interest demonstrated? It's failing here in this particular report. I would then like to just go on to say that I am concerned with regard to, I appreciate it's, take it as a genuine approach to meet with the residents of New Road. And I was really sorry to hear the officer having to try to answer my question. And maybe the portfolio holder would like to step forward and give a more, maybe a steer on that. Because we have certainly on the page that I've referred to, short term in the document is referred to as 0 to 2 years. I already highlighted what medium term was, and then we've got actually short to medium. So in my words, medium starts at 3, short is 0 to 2, so short to medium must be 2.5, anything between 2 and 3. There's an ambiguity, an uncertainty that we must not allow to continue in regard to the treatment of residents who are threatened with potential development. I do understand the equation between council asset, council's desire to develop the asset, but I want to see a better balance with the needs of residents, the care to the residents. We have a duty in that aspect as well. And it's not addressed in this report. It never has been throughout the process, regardless of promises made by officers long before John actually came onto the scene. I would like then, if I may, I was rather hoping perhaps, Chair, you might have gone through the vision for Central Basingstoke, perhaps page by page, but in the absence of that, what I'd like to say again, on page 142, I mean, it's a theme all the way through. Town centre project, what does it talk about? Improving the environmental, shopping and cultural quality. Nothing about residential. Let's remember the residents. I would like to then make a comment in regard to on page 146, which is improvement to the market. Now, I believe I asked time and time again for consideration to relocation of the market. And apart from officers telling me, and I've made suggestions of alternative sites, apart from sort of a finger in the air, I believe, well, we don't think anywhere else is appropriate, I think there are other areas that are appropriate. And I think those other areas would actually instill an improved interest in the market, because my suggested sites move the market down closer to Festival Place. But here's the nub. For the market stall holders, yes, to be able to service the market in my suggested site, guess what? They'd have to park in Central Car Park. Now, maybe we should put the connections there. Why would we being now perhaps not favouring that relocation? I would also like to just talk about the network rail work, and I can't for the moment find what page that is on, and John's going to kindly help me. Yes,
Possibly,
well, 148.
148.
Yes, on page 148. What does this say? A travel plan is currently being prepared for Basingstoke Station to encourage travel to and from the station by public transport, walking and cycling. That's all very well and good and nice, and it might even be green and environmental friendly, but it really isn't appropriate to everybody. I do recall many years ago, Chair, somebody, I think it was from then at the time when I was a councillor in the administration, it was an opposition member saying, you've got to come to terms with the fact that the car's here and it ain't going to go away. What do we hear now? We want to push the car away. I would urge officers, and I have the emails, I can reproduce them, where I have asked time and time again for officers to engage with South West Rail. What have they done? They've upgraded this super booking hall, made it quicker and more efficient for people to pass through in a nicer environment. What have we got? The same 11 drop-off and pick-up points. For people to come maybe from the rural villages where there isn't any public transport, yes, because it's no good them trying to maybe cycle into Basingstoke to pick Aunt Flo up with her suitcases to take her home for the weekend. So I would ask for a commitment from officers to engage with South West Rail to look at that whole area outside the station and to bring it into the modern time like other towns nearby, and we can have a better, improved, faster moving, safer drop-off and pick-up area. Apart from that, like everything else, I have to say, and it has to be mentioned really, again, there's a lot of work here but I am distressed to find officers having to try to make answers, fudge the answer for the portfolio holder. They need to have a stronger steer on it.
Councillor Egan.
Well, I was going to say a lot, but I think after Councillor Parker's, I think I agree with 99% of it, so I think I won't going to say anything else.
Councillor Keating.
Can I ask the portfolio holder to make a contribution at this point?
I think he would indicate if he wanted to come forward, and he hasn't done so. Not this day. So, will you? Thank you, members. I think that's the end of our debate, although Councillor Shaw is finding something to add. Thank you.
Well, just to reinforce the point about this need for clarity. And it's a point of comparison, really, because there's another area of, the town centre car parks, land owned by the Borough Council. There's another area of land owned by the Borough Council, Manidown, where, the council, is really quite clear about what it intends to do when, what it doesn't intend to do. And it, with Manidown, it said, no housing in 0 to 5 years, X number of houses, 5 to 15 years. All we're asking for, is clarity, by the council in terms of what it really intends with these town centre car park areas, because it's only if there's that clarity that there's no way in which the council itself is disadvantaged by simply the process of being clear about what it intends to do, and it really sort of gives greater certainty, for the local residents that, Councillor Parker's referred to very eloquently. And I really don't understand, having been on the council for 14 years, I just can't understand why the council can't get over this issue and actually be clear about what it intends to do or not intends to do. It's perfectly possible, really, if it just simply sets its mind to it as an administration to do something and be clear.
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Mrs. Mayor. I'll ask to Natalie to sum up for us. Thank you.
As usual, members, I'm sure you'll correct me if I've missed anything. Thank you. There's concern about shop closures in the top of town and number of empty units and the increase in shops such as betting shops, and an urge that the council is to look at attracting let-ins to fill our own premises, even if they are only short term. Greater clarity is needed about what the council intends to do regarding the car parks, especially with regards to giving residents more certainty, and I think that was reiterated again just now by Councillor Shaw. Encourage better approach to development in the town centre area to avoid piecemeal development, and to encourage more strategic thinking about the future to consider longer term impacts. With the reference to residential communities is currently living in the town centre is missing throughout the report. We would like more consideration to what those living in the area really want to ensure, so that we can really ensure that town centre living is compatible with all the other town centre activities. The uncertainty faced by residents, particularly in New Road, must stop. We need to be responsible to our residents. Further consideration should be given to the relocation of the market. Request that officers engage with South West Trains to look at the area outside the station to create a safer drop-off area. An additional. Thank you. And improved. Okay.
I'm just asking, Natalie, if I think in general we support the appointment or subject of a town centre manager. I just wondered, John.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. I noted down some additional actions. So could you confirm is what Natalie was going through comments, or were they the list of actions as well? So sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, simply they were the comments from the committee. Okay.
Thank you.
This is a serious comment, Chair. If the portfolio holder won't answer questions of the public and won't answer questions of councillors, that's a serious issue. Thank you. Be asking that my comment be noted.
I don't think we're normally in the process of bringing the portfolio holders backwards and forwards to the desk at Women of Prayer when we decide we want to answer the question. That's not the way the committees have been run in the past. Councillor Gardner, I think you wanted to speak.
If I could move the recommendation on 2.2.
Thank you, Councillor. Agreed. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I say, when I was a portfolio holder, I
Councillor
went
Keating,
to every
Councillor
single
Keating,
meeting.
can I ask that you ask first if you was to speak, not just to turn your microphone on and start blatting out. You could at least wait and acknowledge that there is space for you
Well,
to speak.
at least you're consistent in attacking me at every meeting.
Councillor Keating, it's not my action to attack you, it's just trying to keep a reasonable control and not just people just coming in and speaking when they wish. Yes, you may ask a question.
Can I ask that my comment about asking the portfolio holder to answer questions is noted for the record? And if it's not noted in the comments, I wish to have it recorded as a separate item on the minutes. Thank you.
It's on the webcast, so I don't think we need to go any further than that. Councillor Keating, we won't deny your request. We'll add it. Okay, moving swiftly forward to paper C then. No, it's not. We've done that. Thank goodness. We'll go back there again then. Paper D, High Street Innovation Fund, and I can see Natalie Wigman coming forward to present that. Thank you, Natalie.
Good evening, members.
Good evening.
The council was allocated £100,000 from the High Street Innovation Fund to enhance the vitality of the High Street. As a result of the levels of press coverage and the high levels of public interest in this, we undertook a public consultation to understand the issues with the town centre. To kick-start this consultation, officers put forward 5 potential ideas, but we were clear that we wanted respondents to come forward with their own ideas. The 5 ideas that were put forward were to subsidise business rates to encourage specific types of businesses, encourage space above shops to be converted into flats, update and refurbish vacant shops, make Basingstoke our free Wi-Fi zone, and small-scale environmental improvements. The consultation had 5 parts: a consultation with the businesses at the Borough Business Partnership, a Gazette campaign, a SNAT survey aimed at residents and businesses, meetings with traders from the top of town, and general feedback and comments such as letters and emails, correspondence to councillors. A lot of the general feedback came via a follow-up article in the Observer and something in Basingstoke and Dean today. The results from the different parts of the consultation have all been collated together. Most people included more than one idea, so in total there are more answers than there were respondents. The idea that came out top for the £100,000 to be spent on was marketing, promotion and branding of the top of town area. However, there is a caveat that comes with this one in that it was rated relatively highly through the questionnaire, but 22 of the top of town traders each voted it their priority in a meeting we had with them. So whether or not you take that as one vote or you take that as 22 separate votes is obviously a matter of a discussion. However, marketing and promotion to be successful, it needs something to focus the campaign on, something new. So although we do accept that it is a very important part of the project, in terms of where we focus our improvements going forward, we need to make improvements before we start to focus on the marketing. The second most common answer in the consultation was for a business rate subsidy, which linked very strongly to the third most popular answer, which was about trying to attract different and independent shops to the area. Other highly ranked ideas for the £100,000 include to improve or develop or enlarge the market, and this was the sixth, one of the six highest ranking answers. Reduce or free parking, particularly attracted to the top of town area. Improving cycle links to the town centre and improving cycle storage, and also to make the area more continental. Both those things were joint ranked 9th. Better signage to direct people to the top of town, which was ranked 13th. And events or entertainment or something to act as an anchor for the top of town area to attract people up there. In total, 61 different ideas were put forward for the High Street Innovation Fund money. Other feedback from the consultation referred to issues around homeless people congregating in the area, the nightlife making people feel unsafe, and too much litter in the area. However, I have been informed by the street care department that they have increased the number now of litter bin emptying in that area, and the litter problem has significantly reduced. Overall, the ideas put forward in the consultation on the High Street Innovation Fund were achievable and realistic. There wasn't much interest in large-scale physical improvements, but more smaller physical improvements to the area. Most respondents wanted the area smartened up, both in terms of things like planting, street furniture and paving, but also to shop fronts directly. It will not be possible to make all of the suggested improvements through the High Street Innovation Fund alone. It's only £100,000. But as part of the wider town centre project, it's possible to make a significant impact on the economic vitality of the town centre. This work on the High Street Innovation Fund is being considered by the Town Centre Members Advisory Panel as part of the wider Town Centre programme, and discussions on how this money will be spent will be taken forward as part of this wider project. But I thought it was important to take it forward at this time because we carried out the consultation in the summer, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave it too long before reporting both to members and back to the public on what the findings of that consultation was and what the next steps were for this piece of work.
Thank you, Natalie. Questions to the officer? Councillor Regan.
Just a point of clarification. It's the £100,000. Am I right in saying it is a one-off payment, so they couldn't subsidise the business rates anyway?
It is a one-off payment. It could only subsidise the business rates on a limited period.
Councillor Keating.
Referring to the references to litter, etc., there is an obligation on fast food restaurants, some of whom are at the top of town, to either pick up their own litter or contribute to the picking up of litter in the immediate vicinity. Is that exercise? Is that requirement or the responsibility? Do we ensure that that's exercised?
That's something I need to come back to you on. It's not something I have the evidence for, but I will do.
Councillor Keating, I was up at top of town a few weeks ago, and one fast food chain was outside in the market square picking up litter.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much. My question is in relation to the consultation exercise, and it's been, I'm doing this at the request of a resident to establish whether the Basingstoke Heritage Society were actually consulted, were they actually one of a list of major organisations to consult on in regard to changes or improvements to be made to the top of town.
No, they weren't identified as a specific group to consult. The only access to consultation they would have been through the general public consultation that other residents and organisations would have been able to do.
Can I subsequent? Then, apart from the top of town traders, were there any other corporate bodies or groups that were consulted?
Other than through our business partnership, no. It was generally done through the paper, our website, the Observer, and the Basingstoke and Dean Today article.
Councillor Regan, I think you.
Question is in terms of Wi-Fi. Is it true to say? And I think McDonald's already have Wi-Fi and the cafe next to Paddy Power and other places. So it sounds a good idea. Other places are already doing it.
Yes, that is the case, and a number of the organisations, or the retailers up there do have free Wi-Fi within their premises. It's also something that's looking to be rolled out by a number of providers across the country over a period of time anyway. So the only thing we could really do is to bring it forward faster if we were to look at that.
Councillor Sherrick.
Thank you, Chair. Just two quick questions, which hopefully will have quick answers. This was, or the granting this funding was part of a national review of the High Street and is therefore part of a national scheme. My own observation of the outcome, and it's right that we consult with local traders and local businesses, etc. But it kind of doesn't feel to me like it's the inspiration of drawing on the insights of a national scheme and indeed the person who started the scheme in the first place, Mrs. Porters herself. So I'd like to understand, as part of a national scheme, yes, we were lucky to get £100,000 of funding. That does kind of say we must have been in fairly dire need in order to qualify for that. But where is the benefit of insight and other ideas? And how have we secured that and used it? And my second question is, given that the top idea for the local area supported not just by the traders who some might say would have a vested interest, but also as the highest response rate through the questionnaire is about marketing, I read the response in 5.4 as mildly dismissive. Marketing and promotion is the best idea, and yet it's a tough one because we haven't got anything to market, therefore let's not do it. I would rather say, if that seems to be the thing that gets people behind it, and in light of the fact we haven't got anything from the benefit of perhaps national idea and insight in the scheme, then isn't it the responsibility of this scheme with the £100,000 and the traders who say this is actually what they want to actually come up with something, and maybe not just look at themselves, but look at the sorts of innovation, ideas, events that happen elsewhere in the town. So other partners, including the competitors of the Malls and Festival Place, who seem quite adept at putting on activities. It shouldn't be that difficult to come up with a new idea that could be marketed and maybe bring some fresh attraction to the town. So sorry to be a little bit challenging. My two questions are really adding up to the same thing. We've got an opportunity, and I'm kind of uninspired by what's come through from the consultation, which is maybe why we needed it in the first place.
In response to the first part of your question about the kind of Porter's review of the High Street, it is something that we have gone through at length, and it is something that we will continue to go through as we move the town centre project forward. The key thing that the government suggested was looked at with the High Street Innovation Fund money was this business rate subsidy. And that's what they were really pushing that money to be used for, looking to local authorities to match fund any contribution towards that. It is, again, one of the things we're looking at, but it isn't by all means the only thing that came forward from the consultation. But as the town centre project develops further, these things will be worked up into much more kind of viable options before any decision is taken as to which area we consider, including the outcomes from the Porter's review. In terms of your second point, I accept the importance of marketing for the area. But one thing I want to put it in context of is that we are looking, as an economic development team, we've been looking at the need to market Basingstoke much more strategically and much more than we actually are. There isn't a lot of marketing going on within the borough, but also externally to encourage people to come to the borough. And as part of a wider piece of work I'm already doing, I will consider how we market the top of town as part of that. I don't by any means think we're kind of going to stick it on a shelf and worry about it later. It will run alongside work the council is beginning to look at regarding marketing. It's still within that the list of ideas going forward anyway, so it will be considered as part of the work on the wider town centre project, but it is also something we're looking at under our wider economic priorities as well.
Thank you, members. I think that's the end of questions, and thank you, Natalie. We can now move into debate the paper. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Having looked at 162 of 165, where the individual suggestions come out, the important thing with the top of the town is that it is different to Festival Place and the Moles. It is the top of the town, it's the old part of the town. At the moment it is divorced from the main shopping centre, and what it needs is footfall, what it needs is the speciality shops. So there is scope in there for us as a council to update and refurbish vacant shops, but part of that comes out of the previous paper. It isn't something which is unique in itself. It's something we should be doing anyway. Subsidising business rates and targeting that subsidy may well help to attract new businesses up there. And that would help fill the units which need to be updated and refurbished, and would then create an attraction at the top of the town. Second thing is to improve and develop the market. That is a unique market, charter market we have up there. It's probably not used as much as it should be. Once again, it's to do with footfall. If people come up there, more stalls will appear. And associated with that, tucked away in the joint 15th, the arts and crafts stalls, that is the sort of thing that will be attracted at key shopping occasions, Saturdays, Sundays, when there are people out there. Less so in the week, when there's not the footfall, there's not the demand. Therefore, you're not going to get the supply. A few years ago, we had a presentation, and I can't remember who it was, but I know they came from Blackburn. And some of the councillors here will remember the presentation that we had when we were looking at the lock-up start-up units, which very much sit on the streets, open them up to sell products, and it's very much like the stalls that we have in Festival Place, but they can be top of the town, and they can be targeted at the more speciality functions. Also, with the demise of HMV, there's an opportunity, a niche, for what used to be everywhere, which are independent record shops. Vinyl, yeah. Certainly now that HMV are likely to be no more, there is a need for something like that. So there's an opportunity there for somebody with enterprise to take that up. So looking at it, I would say the areas we need to look at, the arts and crafts stalls, the starter units, include and bring into that with improvement and develop the market, use subsidised business rates and refurbish and update the vacant properties to bring in the businesses.
Councillor Regan. I'm getting a bit worried, Chair. I'm agreeing with everybody, especially my Conservative opponent there.
Don't worry.
But he won't last. But the point I was going to make is quite right. I mean, someone's been around a long time. And I'm going back to many years when I was a cabinet member. One of the first things I had a report. We was worried about retail. When the festival place first opened, or just about to open, they was worried about the impact on the top of the town. And there was a report produced about footfall. And one of the things they recommended was specialist shops to make it markedly different from what the festival place is. And I think that is probably a good idea. Some of the things that you've alluded to. Whether independent record shops are survivable, I don't know. Most of them are closed, actually much. I used to go to Newcastle sometimes. There used to be 5 independent shops. They've all closed and gone online.
They've got iPods now.
They're all online. I mean, even I've got an iPod. I mean, it's right. I mean,
Excuse me, Councillor. Councillor Tilby Washbourne, it is being webcast, and it would look on the webcast that you're holding a separate meeting.
they're excellent.
Thank you.
No, but I lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's very difficult. I think it's difficult then, even more difficult now, because the rapid change in not only because of the economic depression, but obviously the impact and types of shopping. I mean, HMV is a prime example. I spent £3 in there at Christmas. I mean, and I queued up. It was a James Bond film. I was going cheap, but but I spent a lot more on Amazon over the last year, and iTunes downloading. That's the thing. But also, people buy clothes online now and all that sort of thing. So one of the suggestions 11 years ago, was to have specialist clothes shops up the top of town. I don't think that's a go now actually either. I mean, that's more likely too expensive for people. But so I think, you have to. It's a very difficult thing because I mean, some of us who've been around a long time, a bit losing their hair and stuff. Remember when television was killing off the cinema and they'd become flea pits, but the cinema reinvented itself and it didn't get killed off by video either. So there must be a way for retail to reinvent itself, and it probably could be an experimental area at the top of town. I have no answers. I'm just waffling on.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chairman, can we move standing orders, please?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Councillor Parker, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's certainly been some very valued points made. And I think for officers it's been a very difficult item. Because possibly if you were to read the paper cold, without any background knowledge, local knowledge, I think you'd be puzzled a bit. And that's not a criticism of the officers, it's just the feedback, the consultation. Really it's, for my part, it's the environment, it's the street scene. When we talk about some independent specialist shops, I always are nervous a little when we address this issue with regard to top of town, and I think probably we should preempt that these sort of comments with the fact that there are some hardy traders in the top of town who've struggled for years to provide a mixed shopping proposition, and they're to be complimented. The economy is not a making of theirs. The environment they trade in is not a making of theirs. We've got issues like, in the previous paper, we have the parking strategy noted. Well, on the parking strategy, nothing's changed as far as the car parks are concerned, apart from the top of town, the car parking fee's been increased 3 times. And then when we talk in terms as a local authority wishing to assist the traders in that area, then I think maybe regardless of whether it is ranked 6th or whatever it might do in the wish list of consultation respondents, It's a very, in my view, quick, easy measure that could be made to assist attracting footfall to that part of the town. Particularly when you read in another report, the budget report, as to the vast profit that's been made by our car parking fees. And again, I remember, we're all going back into nostalgia, as a member of the administration being again reminded in a particular committee, in fact it was when I was portfolio holder, that car parking shouldn't be a fee income raising part of our delivery. So I would say we shouldn't wait and see what outcome of the report is. Let's give a quick, easy lift to the footfall in that part of the town. I want to also address this issue of the market and markets, because if I was a trader paying full rates, business rates, insurance, there all year, every week, good trade, wet weather, fine weather, maybe like the Delicatessen, a specialist shop in Church Street, then to find that this council maybe is going to promote the Italian week and the French week in the market, I think I'd get pretty annoyed, and I think we have to be careful when we work this thing out. It maybe is unfair. It might be something we would like to see. I think maybe not of great benefit to perhaps that trader, or we should work out somehow they can share in if there's increased trade. But it's something that needs to be addressed. Certainly one thing that's missing at the top of the town is cycle parking. Apart from people strapping them to the lampposts and the street signs, that's something that's long overdue, should have been done. I personally have doubts about this attracting specialist shops with discounts, because once again, if I was somebody who'd been trading there for 10 years struggling, and then find somebody else because we decide we want a dress boutique in there, offer them a discount or a start-up, I don't know. I think that's probably why it's not necessarily high on their list. The traders that are there are actually saying we want some way of drawing attention to us at the top of town. We're here, we've got good products, we're giving a good service, come see. So I do think some form of marketing, there must be some way that we could spend on signage, and that's a capital outlay, that will attract people to what's on at the top of the town. I think a lot of the signs at the top of the town actually show us how to get to the station and show us how to get to Festival Place, but maybe Festival Place aren't quite so keen for signs showing people to go out of Festival Place into the top of the town, and we're the people who can actually put that right. And I do think, I know it's noted in the report that Hampshire County Council, God bless them, after 5 years of maybe this year going to get around to doing something to the paving or in Market Square, but that's just Market Square. The paving area in the top of town is in a dire state, and I think maybe, and I believe that part of the town, top of town, is local authority responsibility. I don't think it's county council. I think it's possibly ours, and if it's not ours, then we should be bullying Hampshire County Council. So I don't envy the officers in actually coming to some real proposals. It is a real mismatch. What I would urge is, in any reports that we do actually pay some sort of credit to those people who are already there trading and have done so for a long time at a great struggle.
Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the first obvious thing is I suspect if we were to ask Festival Place, the owners, and as Weir's the Males, we probably have a reasonable idea what the footfall is in those ones there, because it's the sort of thing they know. because it's run by a bigger business. But I don't think we've probably got any idea of what the footfall is over the. We always talk about the top of the town, but I tend to think of the top of the town, the old, what was London Road that goes on down there, but also the two that go off, Woke Street, and I can remember the other one. It's that sort of C shape, really, and it's that area which are the older streets and the older properties there. But if I go around there during the week, and we often go up to that part of town, there's probably far more footfall and people walking around those areas than there are walking around the top deck of Festival Place. In fact, if you go into town, you'll often find the Mal's is generally a lot busier, and most of the shops are much busier than the ones in Festival Place. And we always talk about Festival Place, but if you look at a lot of the shops, they make a lot of money because they're selling very high value products. You know, if someone buys one iPod or even a phone contract, that's a few £100s. Whereas if you go into some of the little shops up the top of town, or even in the Mal's, those sort of, you know, Poundland, the obvious one. You're going to buy 10 items, you've spent £10. It's just not in the same order, and I think that's something we don't really look at. But the other thing is the market. I mean, I've raised this has come many times, and Stuart's raised it countless times, but I raised it with officers many years ago, because the market as it is now is the size it was when I was a kid, when Basingstoke was a little market town, and it grew and had we had a whole new town, and we had a much bigger market there, and that was a small one, and now that's the only market we've got because we've sort of lost it. And when I was suggesting, well, could we not spread it up the roads a bit at the top of town there where it's a bit flatter, and well, we can't do that, there's not enough room. But we often shop in Winchester because there are a lot more different shops then, and it's a lot more interesting than Festival Place, which, you know, if HMV goes, I can't think of a good reason to go there anymore. But that's it, yeah, Waterstones possibly. But there is a lot of room there. If you go to Winchester, they've actually done that now. They've kept their market. Not only have they kept it, it's thrived, and it's now spreading down what was the main streets there. So it's now T-shaped, and there are quite a lot there, because the problem is if you get below a certain critical mass of stalls, other stallholders won't go. They drift away to larger markets where they believe there are more customers. And I think that's something we need to look at there. Could we extend it into those areas there? But the problem is, as Stuart suggested, there is a potential impact with some of the smaller shops. But I think, you know, it would be useful if we knew what the footfall was in that area there, because I don't think it's necessarily footfall, it's the amount of money that people are spending that's important.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I think my observation on this is that, you know, on a positive note, there have been, you know, in addition to the shops that Councillor Parker mentioned just now, you know, there have in the comparatively recent past been some additional shops that have opened up, you know, and I'm thinking of the top of town sort of slightly more broadly than perhaps one might originally think, you know, places like the Gurkha Grocery on Winton Square, I think it's Premier convenience store on one side of the street, the supermarket, and the sort of two sort of supermarkets come convenience stores, one of which is a sort of halal retailer, again in the sort of Winton Square and nearer the council offices. And I suppose you know, one of the observations I draw from that is that there is, you know, quite a degree of entrepreneurship evident, and significantly sort of entrepreneurship among the sort of minority ethnic communities. And you know, I just offer that as a sort of as a positive observation, with the thought that perhaps if there are, you know, entrepreneurs from those communities in terms of sort of food retailing, perhaps there are some, you know, comparable entrepreneurs in areas of sort of clothing, you know, other goods, and that perhaps that's the sort of profitable area to sort of focus on, and to, you know, to draw some conclusions in terms of sort of practical action.
Thank you, Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I think what's come out of this for me is that there is a need for us to identify what constitutes the top of town. Certainly, in my view, if we designate the top of town to include a specific area, and I think they're more or less self-selecting, we could seek to apply a marketing approach in the form of having specified colours or colour schemes or mixtures of colours. Applicable is certainly in terms of the frontages of shops that we own, and to give a small subsidy to the frontages of shops that we don't own, to ask them to conform to a particular colour scheme which would promote the top of town as a whole. I think that that would have it would have a value, because one could then direct people to the historic image or the black and gold image or whatever from other parts of the town. I do exactly. The corporate brand has been suggested. I do not think that Festival Place is the town. Festival Place is a shopping centre within the town. And I think we should always see it in that way and promote it in that form. But a corporate image and a corporate colours and matters of that nature on a defined definition of the top of town, I believe would be one effective tool to contribute to the development of the top of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It's interesting, because I think, if I talk to people in my area, we would refer to it as the old town. And it's interesting to hear you called it the top of town. And when you start talking about being a historic place, I think old town sort of suits it. I haven't been around that long. I've been around a long time, probably nearly 60 years next month. But that's basically. Councillor Leeks.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of things. I'd like to agree with Councillor Parker about the accessibility of the area. The paving is very mismatched, and at times the canvas are quite nasty, especially down past Basingstoke Service Centre. I can't think of that road. Winchester Street or London Street? Winchester Street. If somebody came up to me and said, what's the biggest put-off, I'll have to say, it's the bucket collectors at the top of town who constantly bombard you throughout the day, that you in the end decide to go around a different way to avoid them. They can follow you down Church Street, Woke Street, and goodness knows where else. And the number of times that I've reported them to our own officers has been quite a lot, especially when I was mayor. And I think that's the biggest off-put going. Certainly of walking through the town, the Market Square, and they're also the charities who want to get your name and address to sign you up for this and that. I could be a very much poorer man than I am now if I'd signed up to everything. But that is one of the biggest off-puts, I'm afraid. And the access.
Councillor Washbourne, even.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. I work up in the top of town, and we're talking about the top of town as if it's this ghost town, as if we've got lots of vacant shops. Well, I'm kind of finding it really hard to think of a single vacant shop in the top of town. So, when we're talking about the regeneration of the top of town, are we talking that we're going to be moving existing traders out of the top of town? And if we are, where are we moving them to? And I think probably more the issue in regard to this is, how do we get the festival place and the top of the town as a to join, so that they're actually complementing each other, and we're actually encouraging people to see that as a whole entity rather than Basingstoke in little bits and pieces.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you for letting me come back. Just like to pick up a few points that have been raised. I think Stuart Parker's absolutely right that we do need to recognise the existing traders that are there. However, somebody came up with this magic phrase, critical mass. If we can attract more specialist shops up there, more people will come. If you've got more people coming, then the existing traders will benefit from it. So it's not a they are going to lose it, somebody else will benefit. It is a win-win situation. Reference to a common colour scheme, I think uniformity would be appalling, considering the unique character of the top of the town. And if you actually spend the time walking down London Street and look above the shop fronts at the actual buildings, there is a wide variety of different building down there. And it's worth looking. And yes, we should have somewhere a guide to the top of the town selling what is there and what is worth looking at, because there's a lot. So I think there is things that we can do, but a lot of them come out of Paper C, development of the town centre, which includes the top of the town. What we're looking at tonight is what we can do with £100,000 on top of what we're doing on Paper C. Now I go back to the points I raised earlier.
Thank you, Councillor. I hope we've given Natalie lots to think about. I even meant the other Natalie, yes. Natalie, are you ready to sum up for us?
Again, members, you've given me quite a lot to sum up, so thank you. Again,
Thank you, members.
jump in if I've missed anything. It's important to acknowledge that the top of town is different to the rest of the town centre. Its attraction is its independence, and we need to ensure we are mindful of this. The charter market is important to Basingstoke. Increasing footfall to the area will increase awareness and the demand. We need to look at options for targeting more specialist shops and potentially moving or expanding the market. We need to continue to be aware of the current economic times with regard to retail and the impact that this is having on the industry. However, those who are still operating businesses in this area are to be complemented. The parking strategy would help to support viability at the top of town and could be a quick win. We should be careful about the impact of any new initiatives or shops and how they may impact, and what impact they may have on the existing traders. Cycle parking, improved signage and general paving improvement would have an immediate impact, especially for accessibility. Further consideration should be given to marketing in support of the existing businesses. It should be recognised that there is entrepreneurship emerging in the top of town, and that is worth considering in the future. There is a need to be clear about what the area is, what area is covered by the top of town, and could encourage premises improvements to support a top of town brand. However, individuality is also important. We need to look at issues that may prevent people from using the top of town, such as charities collectors. We need to acknowledge that there are existing traders in the top of town and that it is not a ghost town. And consideration should be given to partnership approach between other areas of town, the town centre, to benefit all. And we need to ensure that the overall town centre project picks up these comments.
Thank you, Natalie. He's still looking for the job of tour. Councillor Gardner's still looking for the job of tour manager.
I did mention small
Tour guide.
starter units as a possibility, which you didn't include in your summary.
We will add that in. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you, officers. Thank you, Councillor Joe Warner. Good night.